It feels like someone died in this house last night. Although today another beautiful child was born. It's just a pity that with his birth, this baby buries all the hopes of his father. The boy doesn't know about this yet and is fast asleep. Looking at the child, the father sees in him only a terrible creature that will make his life even more difficult. Misfortune was in store for Eugene on the very first day, but his brother's fate is different. Everything was fine with him, and everyone was happy about his appearance. And Eugene was just unlucky. If he were like Ronald, everyone would smile at him too. Someday he will find out why his father and mother disliked him so much. The boy was born without a right arm. Every night, instead of praying, Mom asks God to take him back to heaven. Unfortunately for them, Eugene was in no hurry to die. He heard his father's words when he was still living in his mother's womb. The child was their best hope, and now Ralph will not be able to surpass his brother. He believed that at least his son would surpass his nephew, but this did not happen. Thus, Eugene became a disgrace, trampling on the hopes of his parents. Unlike him, everyone is happy about the success of this little rascal. His smile attracts everyone's attention and gives light. At that time, Ronald was already learning to walk, and for some reason her child is growing too slowly. All day long he just cries and doesn't even try to get up on his feet. One day, he finally manages to take the first step. True, by that time Ronald was already holding a sword in his hands. When Eugene begins training, his brother has been using mana for a long time. She dreamed that one day she would have a child like Ronald. At some point, Ronald becomes the object of Eugene's admiration and envy. That day the snow did not stop for a minute. When the boy was 7 years old, he was sent as a servant to Ronald's house. From the outside, it looked like he was sent to help his brother. In fact, the parents sold the child for $300,000. If only they knew what he had to endure there. Ronald was not a kind boy at all and enjoyed other amusements. He whips his brother just like he does the other children. He soon becomes the one on whom Ronald takes out his anger. And Eugene himself had to hold back his tears. I wanted to cry, not because it hurt. He couldn't bear the fact that all the adults turned a blind eye to this. None of them acted like real adults. Eugene's uncle famously abandoned his family and never returned. Because of this, no one controlled Ronald, and he grew up as an uncontrollable psychopath. Since childhood, Eugene had to endure beatings. Their relationship didn't change at all, even as they grew older. Besides, now he has nothing to defend himself with. He lost and must kneel before his brother. Ronald's talent and God's blessing became poison to him. Even after admitting defeat, he did not forgive his victim for her struggle. It's the next opponent's turn. This opponent becomes Eugene, and Ronald is ready to fight even with a cripple. All his life, the young man envied his brother's strength and talent. He dreamed of being as strong as Ronald. That is why he does not give up and continues to fight. Although his brother doesn't like it when people treat him like that. For this, he punishes him with the harshest blow, sending him into the wall. A cripple without an arm shouldn't treat him like that. He violently attacks his brother when he tries to get up. Ronald believes that such losers will never be able to match his strength. But he still wanted to win, and someday he will win. The dream could not come true by desire alone. He needed constant training. As Ronald grew older, he began to neglect his studies, indulging in alcohol and fornication. But even so, the brother could not defeat him. He was a lazy genius, and Eugene was just a hard-working idiot. On this day, their idol fought in an arena filled to capacity. These two were about to settle the matter with swords. In fact, this was not the first time they had fought, but each time Eugene failed to win. Today was a special day, and he was well prepared. Even Ronald could hardly cope with such an attack. At some point, he stopped seeing everything that is happening around him. This was his chance. Instantly, the guy lunges. There was such a loud explosion in the center of the arena that it could be heard throughout the entire city. The audience can't believe their eyes, but it happened. Today, everyone had to acknowledge Eugene's strength. The main thing was that he won for the first time. Up until this day, he had lost 21 out of 21 matches. But today, he saw a defeated opponent in front of him. People advised the guy to give up because of his countless losses in unofficial matches. But still he won. The time when he was called a weakling was over. If only my father knew what he had achieved over the years. It is unlikely that he would have wanted another son. It was clear that Ronald had no intention of losing. In his place, it would be worth spending time on training instead of idle life. But instead, he simply leaves the arena. Carefully. Scoundrel. A sword strike to the back from Ronald ended the end. He didn't expect such a vile act. But Ronald couldn't have won any other way. Eugene finally defeated his brother and died that same day. The Sword of the Sun contains anti-demon mana, and unless a miracle happens, it will not survive. After this vile victory, Ronald will be remembered as a loser, not a hero. But soon a real miracle happened. Instead of dying, the guy gradually comes to his senses. It seems to him as if he has gone to hell after his earthly sufferings. Everything really did feel like hell, but not this time. No one could have imagined that a miracle-working saint would be present in this arena. She cured Eugene, performing a real miracle. Another moment, and this guy's life would have ended. He had multiple fractures and was barely breathing. But he recently signed a contract with the devil. His parents also confirmed this. There is no other way to explain his victory over Ronald. The mother confirmed that her son had contact with evil spirits. She just wanted to get rid of him, that's all. Victims and bottles of his blood for the contract were found in the family home. He was a devil who sacrificed 300 innocent children to gain power. It's clear why they blame him for this. As punishment, he was to serve life imprisonment. He was destined to suffer for eternity and rot in prison. The tendons on his arms and legs were cut out, and his mana was sealed with chains. In this form, he was thrown into prison. To top it all off, they blindfolded him. But today, a guest came to him who arranged all this. This suit even suits him. The prison uniform should have replaced his regular clothes long ago. He thanks his brother again for losing this fight. After this, they started giving him much less food. The boy had to starve, and death was getting closer every day. He himself wanted to die as soon as possible. Instead, new diseases kept appearing. He was supposed to die in that arena, but now he's forced to rot in prison. Fate is unfair. If only he hadn't been one-armed, everything would have turned out differently. Yet Eugene did not want to die. I didn't want to die. He just wanted to live. Just live like everyone else. Hey, you need to listen when an adult is talking to you. Is he deaf? Suddenly, Eugene realizes that he has been grabbed by the right hand. 1 minute for the right hand. Looking at this man, the boy vaguely remembers his father's face. But why does he call it by another name? If it was a dream, it wasn't such a bad one. At least the air here was fresh, not like the disgusting stench in the underground prison. I wonder how long he's going to ignore Ralph. Using mana, Ralph tries to hurt him, as if he had done something wrong. Eugene quickly blocks this attack. You just need to break the distance with the enemy, that's all. The blow wasn't strong, but it turned out pretty good. Oops. Eugene explains that his hand simply slipped. This cheeky puppy has completely gotten out of hand. He behaves this way only because he was the head of the family. But next time, Ralph's son will crush him without mercy. It turns out that in this life, Ralph is not his father, but his brother. These two have always competed with each other through their children. He will definitely not forgive the boy's arrogance and rudeness today. We just have to wait for the day of the gathering of true swords. What was he talking about? It takes some time to collect your thoughts. If this was a dream, Eugene should have woken up long ago. Memories suddenly began to return to him. He remembers that his mother died giving birth to him. The father did not care about the boy at all. The other kids treated him like a scapegoat. Even after a couple of slaps from the youngest child in the family, he was choking with tears. He was always the ugly duckling, rejected by the main family. A minute ago, he was a one-armed cripple in a dungeon. And now he has become the family's main hope. I think this is called reincarnation. After walking a little, Eugene notices a personal diary. In the past, his entire family was waiting for any opportunity to trample him. This diary was full of self-deprecating entries. It's worth returning to it a little later. In his last seconds, he wanted to live, even when death was near. The one who wanted to die simply disappeared, and the one who wanted to live returned to life. Who's there? There was clearly someone in the room. The guy hears a voice, as if the demon himself decided to talk to him. He reports that Eugene is thinking too poorly and regrets giving him this body. So he was the first owner of this body? That's right. This spirit sacrificed its body for him. But Henry didn't look like a demon at all and seemed quite friendly. It was worth getting closer to understand what was going on here. Henry explains that he has been given the gift that the gods give to people. People who are blessed from birth can sometimes hear this insight. It turns out that he saw God in front of him. But this god looked completely different from the one on the temple icons. He was a very small god. Henry originally intended to summon a ghost god, but Eugene appeared instead. He wants to become a real god, but to do this he needs to win several victories. The achievements will give him the opportunity to complete the summoning, and he will be able to become a true deity. If all this is true, Eugene has a chance for a new life. It was beneficial for both of them. However, his spiritual energy was incredibly low. Her level has dropped so much that this god will not last long. In other words, if there is no god, there will be no Eugene. And this is already bad news. The bastard said that on purpose to make him his puppet. He seems to have got it all wrong. But soon he will find out about everything himself. That's why Henry was here, to explain everything to him in detail. First, we need to refresh his true memories. It will hurt a little, but no one promised an easy walk. These memories don't come easy. Besides, you will have to go through something terrible. The guy is instantly transported back to the moment when he was beaten. These cruel people acted as if he was their sworn enemy. And yet after this, he did not fall into despair. Right now, he was experiencing the feelings of a 13-year-old boy again. But that was just the beginning of the fun. The most interesting things are yet to come. If he's finally ready to listen, Henry will be happy to tell you everything. Fine. He knows exactly about King Ronald and his life story. Henry realizes that his charges know even less than he expected. When he hears the name Ronald, Only one person comes to mind. This story began 500 years ago. Then one one-armed swordsman escaped from prison, killing all the guards. They say that along the way he killed no less than 10,000 people. That is why he remained a great demon in history. Well, it has changed a little in 500 years. It turns out that at some point in the past he did manage to escape from prison, although he was sure that he died there 500 years ago. Ronald was the last person he saw before he died. While the one-armed swordsman was dying, this guy became the Sword Emperor. Bloody bastard, I would like to meet him at least once more. There is no need to worry, because he will still have such an opportunity. But can he meet again with someone who died 5 centuries ago? Hey, don't be so angry. Since he himself came from those times, then this meeting can be arranged. In any case, history was simply a collection of stories written by the victors. The present time is very different from the past, and the children here can do much more. It was hard to believe, but there was no choice. I had to believe that the greatest hero of that time was not Eugene at all. It was about the Emperor of the Sun Sword, who was the real hero. By the way, he remembered that same boy. Salvador approached Eugene one day, long after his release from prison. He admitted that he wanted to become as strong as Eugene. Soon, Salvador became not only his friend, but also his first student. While he was in prison, Salvador visited him several times. The boy swore that he would achieve his release and fully restore his honor. After that day, he never came to see him again. Salvador was the first head of the family, and also managed to leave behind a life mission. The mission was to surpass the dominant family and take its place. Only then will it be possible to face the truth, but it would be better if he just opened his eyes to the truth. Much remained unknown to Eugene himself, especially why he was here. Salvador was ready to do anything to reveal the truth. Soon a new family was created to restore the honor of the fugitive Eugene. If he succeeds in fulfilling the mission, Henry will become a real big god. This deal is beneficial for both of them and sounds pretty good. To do this, you will need to take a few things with you. This sword will definitely come in handy for him. From this moment on, he intends to surpass the main family and rise above those who betrayed him. The mission was glorious, and all that remained was to decide where to begin. Henry tries to figure out what his friend is up to. Not so fast, he will find out everything soon. By the way, if he lived 500 years ago, he can definitely be called an old man. No, this little god is just terrible. From this moment on, Henry promises to obey his master in everything. Beautiful words. But what is happening on that site? It looks like there are nightly fights going on here. It will be interesting to know what martial arts modern people practice. It will be fun when he gets down to business himself. Although his body was still too weak. A second later, the guy stepped back. This child's body gets tired too quickly and something needs to be done about it. In such a disgusting state, it is impossible to even use mana. He understands that even a simple flow of mana can no longer be controlled. By the way, he wasn't expecting guests at such a late hour. Why did Henry suddenly decide to show up at his place in the middle of the night? As the previous owner of this body, he could have learned swordsmanship. Unfortunately, due to his disability, Henry was never able to learn martial arts. In some ways they were very similar, and yet in his place, Eugene would have mastered at least a simple technique long ago. There's no point in making such a fuss about it. Even if mana could be stored in bones, how could Henry know about it? A martial artist needs mana to surpass the strength of an ordinary person. Usually this mana is stored in the human heart. But if Henry has a sacrum, then in addition to his heart, he can store mana in his bones. He still doesn't understand how important it was. If Ronald could become what is called the main king, he must have a sacrum too. Eugene was reborn with a sacrum, which was something he always dreamed of in his past life. But the world has changed too much in 500 years. Henry reminds him that he cannot convey the image in his heart. His protege doesn't even know such simple things. An image was the name given to an imaginary storage facility for mana. Surprisingly, in the modern world, mana is no longer stored in the heart. Not really. There is a meditation method for storing mana in the heart that was used in the past. But in modern times, mana is stored in an image called a star. The number of stars used represents the strength of the martial artist. It turns out that the oldest member of this family knows how to create at least one image. The image was created to avoid the risks that come with storing mana in the heart. In the past, more than half of the masters died due to storing mana in their hearts. If mana exploded, it always resulted in death. Just don't tell me he's going to extract the mana from his heart. He would have to take such a big risk if he wanted to become a full-fledged martial artist. But why let mana spread everywhere? At least so that one annoying god would not interfere with him. Henry explains that there is a formula for using mana efficiently. The last phrase reminded me of something from the distant past. The magical power of the cycle would get out of control and explode in about half of the practitioners. In other words, the other half survived, but he could end up in the first half and die. The guy decides that this needs to be checked. Yes, he seriously decided to check it out. His new body has a wonderful sacrum and heart with a magical cycle that is also very strong. If Eugene succeeds in his training, the sacrum will contain the required amount of mana. Otherwise, the sacrum, which has been exhausted over the last 13 years, could destroy his body. Without wasting any time, he began his nightly meditation. There are about 10 years left before this body disappears forever. This time will be enough if he does everything correctly. For about the same amount of time in the past, he was locked in an underground prison and slowly dying. Those 10 years were just terrible. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Who is this? Vincent always entered without permission and knocked only for show. Suddenly, he notices that his young master is behaving very strangely. It turns out that in his new life, Eugene has his own servant. What's wrong with that? That makes it even more interesting. He arrived just in time and Eugene orders him to bring clean clothes. Also, he needs to clean his room while he's training. Vincent still can't understand why the gentleman made such a mess here. His job is cleaning, not giving out valuable advice. Suddenly, he realizes that Eugene was studying dark magic here because everyone began to despise him. Local servants also need to have everything explained to them using their fingers. He approaches him with a different attitude if he doesn't understand in a good way. Eugene demands that he carry out the order if he still wants to work in this house. But he already said that he hates doing what he doesn't like. Nobody promised him a heavenly life working as a servant. If he doesn't want to do it, Eugene can handle it without his help. Just let him not be offended later when the day of reckoning comes. He hopes that they understand each other. Yes, this guy has become much braver than he was the day before. I'll have to take his dirty things. Although Vincent will remember this humiliating task for a long time. It would have been better if Eugene had not heard the words he sent his way. Over time, he will get used to it. And now it was time to do the most interesting thing. Hearing this, Henry realizes that this guy's entertainment is becoming more and more dangerous. A person who has taken many innocent lives has a special energy, and he had never felt the kind of energy that should be in this body all day. So what is he going to do about it? He is going to get demonic energy, and is ready to do anything for this. Another body needed to be found, but it was too late now. Meanwhile, the servant had already returned. He returns with clean clothes, as the master requested. The gentleman must be pleased with the way he cleaned the room. Everything is great, just don't turn it into a battlefield anymore. Still, he did a pretty good job. Eugene asks to bring a wooden sword about 1 meter long from the storeroom, but he may refuse to do so. Well, in that case, I'll have to take it myself. He clearly didn't expect this answer and tried to stop him. Seriously, don't act like he doesn't understand the danger. The most dangerous thing is to grab him by the right shoulder. Eugene, with a deft move, quickly knocks the servant to the floor. He still had bad memories of being attacked from behind. It's worth remembering this the next time he's about to pull a stunt like that. The movement made Eugene's whole body scream in pain, but he was glad that everything turned out this way. Previously, he couldn't even move an object from one place to another, but now he can do it. If Vincent has something to say, he needs to say it now. Oh yeah, it seems he wanted to bring a wooden sword from the storeroom. It's great when they understand each other perfectly. And it's great when some scoundrels do everything without asking unnecessary questions. Vincent closes the door, although he could have done it more quietly. Is he still here? This rascal still needs to be taught good manners. It's clear that after Eugene's rebirth, this guy's life will change a lot. Next time he intends to prove that he never intended to become someone's servant. But less than a minute later, he carried out his master's order. By the way, among Eugene's acquaintances there were several people without a right hand. These guys had a hard life and met a terrible end. Oh yeah, I almost forgot this stick. There is no need to be so ashamed of your job, because there are worse jobs. Having received the order from his master, he soon sets off again on another mission. A little practice won't hurt him until he completely loses his skills. Luckily, there was still some free space on the training ground. I wanted to understand what this body is capable of a day after reincarnation. He knew that this body was incredibly weak, but he didn't think that he would be exhausted after a couple of blows. But the most important thing was the feeling that he had a right hand. Wow, were there any scoundrels here who were preventing other people from training? Patrick knew who he was dealing with, and wasn't at all afraid to show up here. There is still much he doesn't know about the person standing in front of him. Patrick was a distant relative of Eugene's, dating back to his first life. He is one of the candidates who has every chance of winning the upcoming competition. It was with his father that Eugene met in the first minutes of his new life. It's clear why he behaved so insolently towards him. Even if he was a rising star among the heirs of the side branches, it still didn't mean anything. Unexpectedly, Eugene learns that he will have to fight this guy at the True Swords meeting. This competition, which will be attended by the main families, will be the main martial arts competition. The winner will be given the chance to face the heir apparent in battle, and Vincent hopes that he won't hide from him behind his father's back. And since he had the chance to meet the direct heir, it was interesting to look into the eyes of the one who would soon lose. Eugene had no intention of losing, especially for such a stupid provocateur as this guy. In the past, Even the most skilled fighters respected his talent. It's time to make those who have not yet experienced his power respect him. This fight could have started much earlier than the day of the competition. But now he should be more careful, because this guy is still much stronger. He obviously has a lot of self-doubt due to growing up in a foster home. The level of skill has declined greatly over the last 500 years. However, he can fix it. Luckily, he has everything for this, and the competition will be the right moment. The two pointed wooden swords at each other, but they wanted to take a real one in their hands. However, the fight could not begin now unless they wanted to be disqualified. With his current aura, Eugene was too vulnerable and he knew it. However, he behaved quite boldly. If Vincent was scared of a wooden sword, there was no reason to worry about the competition. But this little rascal has a reason. Bastard. It was in vain that he provoked Vincent into a real attack. It's good that someone appeared nearby who kept the boy from doing stupid things. What a relief. If Patrick hurts the young master here, he will have a reason to refuse. The devil, he's right. In that case, Patrick will definitely wait for the meeting of the true swords. The look of this young man could frighten anyone. Once in the room, Henry reminds him that he shouldn't behave like that. He himself teased Patrick and provoked him to do this. It was today that he was going to summon the spirit of the king, and now everything went down the drain. Hey, is he even listening or not? Maybe it's time to stop looking at pictures and finally listen to Henry. Eugene had to focus on what was really important right now. The point is that he was soon to create a blessing, but if he keeps staring at the photos, Henry won't be able to help him. For example, the blessing of the King of the Gnomes has the best effect on strengthening the body. The more you train one feature, the stronger it becomes. Its mid-level feature is defense and destructive power. This means that combat techniques must be focused on one feature. It was with this force that Patrick managed to deftly cut the dummy in half with just one blow. You can only compete against such people if you have mastered similar strength. To do this, he goes to the training stadium. Here, no one will disturb him for sure in the next few days. The boys notice that this young man can wield a sword with one hand. On the training field, servants need to work, not gossip about their masters. Deputy Commander Ernest asked them to keep their mouths shut. If they want to continue working here, they shouldn't blacken the gentleman's name. He could not remain silent at that moment. And yet, some of the words said about Eugene were true. They whispered about him as if they had no respect for their young master at all. In fact, the guy was already used to people looking down on him. No one expected that a one-armed man would one day be able to defeat the best fighter. Suddenly, he realizes that someone is still capable of showing respect to Eugene. This recovery potion makes training much easier. The deputy commander considered it an honor to meet the young gentleman and became one of his first friends. He was the only one who didn't laugh at him. Ernest noticed the look of this young man, who was constantly in search of the unknown. But if you look closely, Eugene knew a lot more about this guy. He's probably distracting him from his work now and doesn't want to take up too much of his time. This is partly true, because there are only a few days left before the competition. Now we need to give the dummy another good whack. It's hard to say how much time has passed since the start of the training. But the guy trained as if he was doing it for the first time in his life. He wrote down all the knowledge he received from Henry in his personal diary. This made it easier to use them in practice in the next training session. Suddenly he realizes that he can feel mana in his heart. Yes, he began to see much more than the others. The sword's path, drawn with lines and dots, perfectly demonstrates its abilities. Now is the time to get back what he lost. How do you like this blow? Patrick would probably like this if he could still see. Now his fencing was complete, because it was much easier to do it with two hands. By the way, a hearty dinner was already ready. Training takes a lot of energy and you need to recharge. I wonder what he cooked. Within a second, it became clear that nothing good was happening. If he wanted to steal food, he should have done it a little more covertly. Better yet, wipe your face with a clean napkin. It would be foolish to deny that Vincent ate all the best things. Now Eugene is ready to turn a blind eye to this. But if this happens again, this guy will be in trouble. Luckily, he understood everything the first time. And yet there was still something left on the plate, and it was possible to have a little refreshment. It is very easy to control people through fear, but it is impossible to earn trust this way. Therefore, Eugene decides not to put pressure on his servants by force, but to use only words. Soon Vincent will no longer be ashamed to serve in this house. After his victory, people will start to treat Eugene differently. After these words, he remained on the threshold for a long time. The boy had never seen his master in such a mood. His composure inspired hope for imminent change. Meanwhile, Ernest was alone on the training ground. Eugene should have been here at this time, but for some reason he wasn't. Perhaps the young man decided to withdraw from the competition. The main question was who managed to cut this doll? Could it really be that the gentleman himself mastered such a powerful blow? If this is the case, the competition has a new contender for victory. What if this guy was able to discover hidden talents in himself? In fact, his suspicions would soon be confirmed. Soon he hurried to visit his new friend. Gradually, Vincent really began to treat his duties differently. He became damn polite, although he still harbors a grudge. Suddenly, he notices that his shirt is made of rare cotton. Its rarity is that noble persons certainly do not use such cotton. It turns out that in addition to stealing from the kitchen, he also makes a living selling the owner's cotton. Eugene realizes that this guy has been stealing for years. He may have appropriated many other things besides cotton and food. However, there are other suspects besides Vincent. Meanwhile, Patrick's training never stops for a minute. He trains with weighted kettlebells in his hands. But against the strongest mana, this may not help. You need to train more. He is ready to do anything to avoid being disgraced at competitions. He can't get this boy out of his head. However, in this house there is a man who is much more calculating than his son. Ralph reminds that all emotions should be directed towards training and not wasted on nonsense. If they want to get out of poverty, he has to try. This young man was the main hope of their family. This means that their fate depends only on him. He had never heard such words from his father before. It seems that this boy's parents once crossed him. Meanwhile, Henry decides to teach his protege a little theory. The book contains a lot of information about modern techniques, but if Henry gets in the way, lessons will have to be cancelled. This means that he will not receive any information about the miraculous stone. If you absorb the crystallized mana of the miraculous stone, your body will instantly become stronger. Judging by the records, only a few succeeded in this. He still had a little time to try. Well, there's no point in wasting time. He wants to give this little god a more significant victory. He will have such an opportunity very soon. Eugene immediately gives the servant an assignment. He wants it done quickly and without delay. It's good that the deputy head doesn't know about this yet. Just then, a young servant came to see her. Once at the door, he apologizes for coming uninvited. But he could not disobey Eugene's order. This boy has been acting strange lately. Well, if he has a business, he had better state it quickly. He explains that the young master wants to speak personally with the head of the family. In addition, Eugene asks the leader to personally attend the True Swords meeting. It is difficult for him to convey this, but such is the will of the master. And it was also retribution for stealing money from the budget. The last phrase caught the woman by surprise. She couldn't believe that Eugene was hinting at her involvement in the theft of money. It's better not to anger this woman and leave here quickly. It is now clear that this boy will pass on threats through his servants. Soon she was already in the head's office. Bernard was meditating as usual. He wasn't expecting any guests at all. But even with my back, I felt someone's presence. Clara apologizes for the sudden visit, but she has business regarding the gathering of True Swords. The young master asked the chief to personally attend the event if he found time. Moreover, he promises to prove his worth. But this boy was too inexperienced to speak of the value of his pedigree. And yet these were only his words, which she simply came to convey. If necessary, Clara can handle all the paperwork herself. She is confident that Eugene will be able to prove himself. Otherwise, he would not be acting so confidently. Besides, he recently took advantage of her weakness. However, this could have been left unmentioned, since everyone already knows about the theft of money from the budget. Perhaps she did it for Eugene to use the money in the future. Bernard has no reason to interfere in this. Anything else? There had long been rumors around the city that Eugene was the son of that very warrior. Bernard had known this woman since his youth, and since he personally invited him to the gathering of swords, it was worth going there. On the day of the True Swords gathering, as expected, the stands were filled to capacity. The main contender for victory was in the front row. Patrick knew what he was worth and what he needed to do. The first thing he did was go to the head, on whom much depended in this city. It's surprising that he showed up for the event in person. Most likely, he came to look specifically at Patrick, the rising star among the heirs. Yes, this was his chance to destroy Eugene in front of everyone. First, you need to get rid of other rivals. A couple of idiots still remained in the arena. Getting rid of them wasn't difficult. It wasn't in vain that he spent so much time training his mana. With her help, Patrick's sword was much more powerful in close combat. It's unlikely that any of these talentless newbies will be able to do anything against him. Ralph was the loudest in the stands, cheering for his son. None of the opponents were able to land a single blow on Patrick. Yes, he did know how to do some things. It's time to find out what Eugene himself has learned. The technique Patrick used seemed familiar. He acted so cruelly as if it was the most important day of his life. He wanted to show the boss everything he was capable of. I wanted to see my main rival as soon as possible. In this, they were similar. Well, if everyone is ready, we can begin the main part of the competition. As in the first rounds, Patrick showed himself to be excellent. Even the children of the most famous fencers could not find a response to him. In a little while, this stadium will be filled with their bodies. What will Bernard say about this? He must be proud of his country's future warriors. Arrogant fellow. I wonder how his expression will change after he loses. Soon, it was time for the main event of the event, and these two were already there. Suddenly, Eugene announces that he has one condition. A servant appears nearby and quickly brings a wooden sword. He intends to fight with a wooden sword, and to conduct the duel only with his left hand. What did he say? Is this boy seriously going to make things so difficult for himself? For Patrick, such words were an insult. Otherwise, this behavior cannot be explained. He wants to disgrace him in front of the whole crowd. Ralph believes that the young master is looking for an excuse for his possible loss, and yet Bernard agrees to this condition. There is no reason to refuse a guy if he wants it himself. These were exactly the words Eugene wanted to hear. Patrick still held his sword in his hand and had no intention of changing it. If he wants to fight with a simple piece of wood, that's his right. Moreover, he allowed himself to be hit 3 times immediately after the start of the fight. Ready, let's go. Patrick was ready to tear this upstart to pieces. But Eugene would hardly have gone for it if he hadn't been so confident in himself. Even before the competition began, he discussed tactics in detail with Henry. It was clear that the first attacks would be short and quick. Patrick felt like victory was already close. But the second blow will be decisive. The first swings of the sword were just a distraction. Now he was about to deliver his signature blow straight to the chest. But Eugene had something to say in response. With the help of strong mana, he easily repelled this blow. Incredibly, he deflected his opponent's sword with his bare hand. It can be considered that Patrick's first 2 attacks led to nothing. If Patrick wants to win, his third attack must decide everything. Patrick should have tried, because until now, Eugene had only been defending himself. And what will he say to this? And for this, he must have been mad, because in his rage he smashed the stone floor of the arena with his sword. Nobody promised an easy walk, and besides, a real man must be able to endure pain. But that was the very third blow. This means that his attack ended in complete failure. Now it was Eugene's turn to use his wooden sword. Could he really seize the initiative with some damned stick? The referee could not intervene and stop the fight. Only now did Bernard begin to understand why he had been invited here. Looking at his son, Ralph could not believe that there was no trace left of his former strength. But he was in no hurry to get to his feet and remained in place. But what could a guy who didn't know how to use mana do? Even Henry had a hard time understanding where Eugene got this strength from. They just didn't know that he was a martial artist in the past. That's why he was able to predict his opponent's movements so easily. Then Patrick should try something else. The guy is clearly angry, but there's no point in acting like a complete idiot about it. And yet, those who considered Patrick the main contender for victory were right. He had never given up in his life, and was determined to show his character. The very first serious attack made it clear that the real battle was just beginning. Of course, Eugene could have foreseen this outcome. And yet it was not easy. Patrick was ready to do anything to fulfill his father's orders. Well, then you should prepare for the worst. Damn, that hurt. But how did he manage to break through the steel sword's defense? Could it be that this young man has been hiding his true strength all this time? To test this, Patrick launches another attack. The wooden sword was already rushing towards him at full speed. The sword plunged straight into his chest, at the very moment he opened himself for the blow. Previously, Patrick had no idea that he could fly. Seriously, Eugene was just tired of all this humiliation. All this time they had only been watching children's games, but now the time had come for an adult duel. All that's left is to give it a good push. Then he turned his full force on one vile bastard. Before Patrick could get to his feet, a second blow followed. In this position, it is simply impossible to dodge, and yet he made one last attempt. At that moment, Eugene noticed something unusual. The point of Patrick's sword connected with the point of Eugene's own attack. He used the same technique that Eugene himself had once used. This technique was dangerous, so it was better to end the fight quickly. After such a blow, he will definitely not get back on his feet. It seemed as if all the demonic power had gathered in one point, and all this power was directed at Ralph's nasty son. All that was left was to hope that Eugene had not intended to kill him. The simple wooden stick in his hand seemed like a deadly weapon. Moreover, he still used only one hand, not his right one. But his opponent's right hand started to have big problems. More accurately, he will no longer have any problems with his right hand. Yes, he did cut off his right hand, although it was just a simple competition. The referee immediately declared the end of the fight, because the defeated opponent was no longer capable of anything. Even a whole bottle of healing potion is unlikely to restore his lost arm. His hand still gripped the hilt of the sword, but now it was on its own. Eugene did not look like the young man Henry had seen before, but the leader himself wanted this battle to be won. Since the leader was here, he had to see this victory with his own eyes, and he saw her. Bernard, like no one else, knew the main secret of this winner. Without hesitation, he declared that Eugene had rightfully deserved the victory. There were those in the arena who did not agree with this decision, but no one cared at all about their opinion. The rules did not state that it was forbidden to injure an opponent. This means that the crystal rightfully goes to the winner of the competition. This miraculous stone will help the young fighter in his development more than once. At the moment when Bernard handed the stone to the winner, a loud voice suddenly rang out in the hall. Ralph still insisted that the boy was acting against the rules. The bastard cut off his son's hand when he didn't even attack. It was clear that he hated Patrick and was prepared for this outcome. The worst thing was that the priest came with bad news. From the look in his eyes, Bernard could tell that the guy was in bad shape. He was not mistaken because several priests tried to heal the lost hand at once. However, it was impossible to implant it back into the body. This meant that his son would now be left with one arm forever. Ralph demanded that the priests obtain the rare artifact, even if it meant turning the entire city upside down. It is clear that in his place, every father would have done the same. Nobody wants to have a son who, instead of a championship title, ends up as an armless cripple. If they don't hurry, even the high priest won't be able to help. Even a third-level priest was powerless. Now some were beginning to guess why Eugene had invited the chief to the competition, but he had prepared a little surprise for them. The head declared him the winner of the competition. Thus, by denying victory, Ralph denied Bernard's very power. Eugene spoke so smoothly that Ralph had no answer to this card. If he's telling the truth, Ralph needs to be arrested immediately. He claims that Patrick would have killed him if the fight hadn't ended that way. On his father's orders, he was ready to kill him in front of the whole crowd. What is he carrying? If the boy is right, this scoundrel is involved in a serious crime. Now all that remains is to wait and see what Bernard thinks about this. Approaching him, the head wants to say a few polite words. This bastard will rot in prison for the rest of his days if he doesn't admit his guilt. It was clear that Bernard was not to be trifled with, and that he had to confess everything. In turn, this young man showed himself to be excellent in the competition of true swords. True, Henry played a significant role in this victory. But is it worth talking about victories when his son could have remained crippled forever? At this rate, he will lose his right arm forever. Henry realizes that they have a great opportunity. If they fix everything, his protege will be able to enlist the support of Bernard himself. So it turns out that the right hand cannot be returned even with the help of a miraculous stone? Unfortunately, this is true. In that case, Eugene has a brilliant idea for this. He offers to personally return the hand of today's opponent and end this. Give him back his right arm? Indeed, Eugene states that he is capable of this, but only if he hears an apology addressed to him. With the help of the sword, he wants to prove his case to Bernard himself. With one movement, he cuts the rope on the old man's body. If he repents, he will receive a miraculous stone to heal his son. Otherwise, his beloved son will always remind him of today's defeat with his appearance. And these words could hurt any father. Even if I had to apologize to that boy, there was no other way out. When he heard Patrick's groans of unbearable pain, the decision had already been made. Right now, he was ready to pierce his palm with a sword if that would earn him mercy. He did it for his son. It was difficult to watch this from the outside, although it was even more difficult for Ralph, and yet overcoming himself, he swings his sword. Now it was the judge's turn to intervene. The guy instantly cuts off the blade of the sword, not letting him do it. Yes, his hand was still intact. Great. After that, no one had any doubts about this young man. The crystal should rightfully be his, and today he will receive it from Bernard's hands. Here it is. It is this magic stone that can heal a wound that is usually considered incurable. To do this, the priest must read a prayer, activating his mana. After this, he bites the stone with his teeth and all the energy spills out. It was a real miracle, capable of even returning a lost arm. Ralph realizes that they still have a chance to fix everything. It's incredible, but it worked. Although it is a bit of a pity that the stone was wasted so ineptly. All this time, Vincent did not leave the door for a minute. Even he finally realized that his young master had changed greatly. He could have punished him for stealing food, but instead, he left him in the house. After this competition, everyone will respect him. He not only won, but also healed his defeated opponent. Vincent is ready to please the young gentleman with good news. Soon he will start preparing dinner. As Eugene asked, managing your servants was a difficult task. Hell, there's something more difficult to do. Suddenly, he hears a knock on the door. Instead of Vincent with a hot dinner, he sees a priest in front of him. Today was a wonderful evening for such a meeting. This is his first time in this house, and he is glad to welcome the young owner. However, the purpose of his visit is still unclear. It turns out he wanted to thank Eugene for his help. As a token of gratitude, he wants to give this miraculous stone. This award was rightfully earned by the one who showed leniency to the defeated opponent. He once became a priest to heal the sick, but recently it has become clear that there are even more powerful healers. One of those healers was right here. Eugene hadn't received so much gratitude in one day in a long time. Thanks to him, the priest rethought his whole life. If the boy needs help, he can use this sign. No one yet knows that he recently became a second-class priest. Is this true? Either way, showing this sign is like showing a gold coin to a poor man. Anyone would like to get her, and now she has gone to Eugene. Finally, he promised that they would soon meet at the temple. Now they have a good friend among the local abbots. It seems he made the right choice of student. Although it is still unclear which of them was the real teacher. Usually, Father dines alone, but one day, after the meeting of the True Swords, someone else came. This girl achieved an incredible victory at the meeting of True Swords. Perhaps something similar will happen this time too. But now I just need to take a little break from everything. It's worth taking precautions, even if the chances of such an event happening are small. This is a little confusing. Suddenly Vincent bursts into the room. For a long time the guy cannot utter a word, but Eugene already understands that the head of the family invited him personally. True, he could have done this without an intermediary. However, the invitation had been received, and there was no point in refusing it. There was no need to rush, but there was no point in being late either. Suddenly he sees a familiar face in front of him. Mother? In fact, the woman across from him was Eugene's stepmother. Since childhood, she behaved strangely with him, as if she did not want to see him. Although this woman knew how to hide her true feelings, especially in the presence of high-ranking officials. Bernard had never felt such an aura before. The strength of a true adult warrior emanated from this young man. He immediately notices someone staring at him, without yet understanding what the matter is. You shouldn't have put pressure on your son during a personal meeting. It was worth explaining. He quickly reminded that his mother had called Bernard his father, not the head of the family. She seems to have missed it. It must be admitted that the young man quickly noticed this. He called him here for 2 reasons. Besides congratulations, he needed to check Ralph's concerns. It was Ralph who gave him the idea of the boy's superhuman strength. Otherwise, how can one explain that even a third-class priest could not do anything? Perhaps his mother was connected to a dark force, and Eugene inherited from her knowledge that was inaccessible to others. However, it is unlikely that such a young boy had such an assistant. While they were discussing his fate, he felt the same thing he had felt many years ago. They talked about him as if he was a nobody. However, he learns that Ronald will soon become the real king. He could repel any enemy attack with one strange swing of his sword. This technique was very different from the others, but was familiar only to Eugene. Once in the past they fought with swords and he simply stole his technique. He thought for a moment. Looking at his stepmother, anyone in his place would have thought about it. This woman gave off such a dark aura that it was as if she were a demon. However, now he came to talk only with Bernard. Henry advises him not to answer this woman's questions. She is able to distinguish truth from lies with her own eyes. If you make up excuses, her gaze will reveal any lie. Maybe Henry has some suitable anti-magic? He will definitely find a way to resist her dark energy. It's a pity he didn't think of this before visiting Bernard. Wait a minute, there is one way. Just one step could separate Eugene from overcoming the wall of fear. If you can get insight, the rest will follow. Enlightenment. Did he really receive enlightenment without any blessing? It's strange. Why does this surprise her so much? For a while, he simply didn't know what to say to her. You just have to repeat Henry word for word and he will get out of the water unscathed. He repeats after the little god the words that his blessings can be tested in the temple. But why in the temple? The thing is that if there is evil in a young man, the priest will definitely see it. Each priest had a magic crystal for this purpose. This means that she just has to try and all her doubts will be dispelled. As he told all this, she realized that the young man's words rang true. He had been eyeing the mysterious sword techniques for a long time and decided to learn them himself. All this time, Henry was loudly prompting him with the words he needed to repeat. In fact, something similar happened 500 years ago. It's as if 2 lives have merged into one and he feels this invisible connection. Bernard also seems to understand why the boy says this so confidently. He thought that his father would be able to correctly assess his inner aura. Well, that sounds reasonable. Bernard didn't notice that he scratched his chin when he was unhappy about something. But his decision was already ready. He allows him to study his martial art. Although the stepmother thought that the art of swordsmanship was similar to that of the great demon king. But his decision was unwavering. Even if he showed his swordsmanship, the ruling family would still cause a scandal. This is precisely what Bernard's decision was based on. He had already taken into account everything that was necessary. Now everything was clear. If Bernard approves this, then the responsibility will be his. Therefore, he must do everything possible to become better and not harm anyone. Fortunately, this was not a problem, and Bernard was happy with the outcome. He was even ready to fulfill one of his wishes if the young man wanted something. However, the young man only wanted to become stronger. Perhaps he should introduce the young man to the best fencing masters. However, access to a library would be the best gift. Only star martial artists are allowed to enter the library. Still, he wouldn't miss the chance to act like a spoiled child. Funny argument. He might also need the Crimson Lotus. It was a reward for keeping the promise to the boy. Now the Crimson Lotus went to someone much younger than its first owner. Everyone in his place would like to get their hands on a sword like this. Eugene was beside himself with happiness, but it was too early to rejoice. He had much more to achieve in the future, and his journey was just beginning. As he descends the stairs, he immediately notices his servant. This time Vincent was not late, and that was already a small consolation. Suddenly the stepmother decides to delay him a little. Did something happen? According to ancient customs, he must visit the Crimson Fortress. He recently won the meeting of true swords and now must visit this place. After all, This was the main condition for entering the Crimson Fortress. For a moment he didn't know what to answer. To be honest, he wasn't sure yet whether he should go there. Every day he learned more and more about his stepmother, and she knew too much. She had never paid so much attention to him before. How does she know that Eugene was planning to defeat the Crimson Demon? The Crimson Demon cannot be defeated with one blow. Even though she didn't love him, she could still give him some valuable advice. It was worth thanking the stepmother for such a hint. She just wanted to explain the Crimson Demon's features to him, and he turns around and leaves. Amazing martial artist. She looked after him for a long time. By that time, he was no longer the simpleton who could be easily fooled, and his cunning servant knew about it. He seemed to think for a moment. You shouldn't stand with your back to a girl, especially when she calls you by name. Sophia realized that he was again planning something bad against the young master. But can't you see that he's just washing his clothes for him? Since when does he act like he's not embarrassed about his job anymore? The maid had been absent for too long, and it was necessary to find out everything quickly. She will still have plenty of time for this. However, the young master is in no hurry now. As usual, Eugene goes through all the literature he found. But among this pile of junk, it is becoming increasingly difficult to find a useful book. Maybe Henry can handle this better. There was not a single record of events from 500 years ago. Most likely someone deliberately erased them from the library archive. Either way, they still have time to find at least something. Henry believes that Patrick's family may be involved. Suddenly he realizes that Eugene is not at all who he thought he was. If he said right now that he was a great demon, he would obviously be shocked. It would be better if they asked about something else. But he was impatient to find out the whole truth that was being hidden from him. Well, he asked for it. You don't even have to try to cover your ears, even if the truth hurts the ear. What else did he want to hear? Suddenly he realizes that what he heard made Henry feel seriously ill. It seemed as if the name of his demonic entity had a bad influence on the little god. What's here? He hadn't noticed this book before. It's strange that it's among the books on mana training. Opening the book, he realizes that he has come into possession of an encrypted historical record. Does anyone know how to read the ancient language? Gradually he manages to decipher something important. All this time, Henry did not dare to fly too close to him. The main character of this novel has no image, and his only feature was the power of love. Traits are not usually used to awaken mana flow. In other words, without an image, uncontrolled mana will make all this impossible. But right now, in this room, there is a person who saved mana without an image and survived. Even with the help of the image, it is dangerous to master this heavy mana. It seems he found a clue on how to become stronger. At the exit from the library, Sophia is already meeting him. When she first heard about the fight with Patrick, she cried, just like she was crying now. She was away for a short time due to urgent family matters. At this moment, Eugene remembers how kind this girl was to him. She did a lot for him in his past life when others turned their backs, and now she was in front of him again. But she remembered absolutely nothing. For a second he even felt a little awkward. She doesn't have to kneel because there's no reason for that. At this moment, another participant in the recent events appears nearby. It's incredible, but Patrick himself came here, knowing who was waiting for him here. He had no doubt that he would run into the boy here. Now only fragile Sophia stood between the two old enemies. She was afraid that one of them would break loose. But it was clear from Patrick's expression that he was not in the mood for a fight. In fact, his former rival didn't want the conflict either. To ease the tension, she suggests that everyone have a steak. With blood, for example. It doesn't look like there are any vegetarians here, does it? This guy didn't seem like the life of the party. If someone wanted blood here, they will get it. It is better not to bare your blade to one who can answer. He orders Sophia to leave this dangerous place immediately. In the heat of a fight, she too can accidentally get hit by a hot hand. It seems he is right. You shouldn't stand close to a sharp blade, especially one that big. Suddenly, Patrick says that he didn't want to start the fight at all. Instead, he kneels before the winner. He was a coward that day, but he doesn't want to be one anymore. This is the best he can do now if he wants to maintain his honor. What came over him? The maid had never seen Patrick kneel. Henry warns that this scoundrel may be planning a deception. These thoughts made everything in the little god's head get mixed up. He didn't trust Patrick, but he still had a good idea. This gesture can be taken as a sign of consent. According to tradition, Eugene was supposed to place the blade of the sword on the knight's shoulder. Thus he accepted the oath of the one who would now serve him for the rest of his life. As long as they are loyal to each other, they are obliged to protect their brother in arms. The last word sounded too pompous, and yet Sophia could not understand how this was even possible. But it's good that everything ended on a happy note. By the way, Eugene's speech was indeed a bit exaggerated. But if Patrick himself wanted it, then they are on the right track. Meanwhile, in Bernard's office, the voices continued to murmur. It looks like Eugene is planning to enter the Crimson Fortress next year. She was going to tell him about the Crimson Demon's characteristics. But the boy then refused help and looked very confident. The Crimson Demon can only be attacked by those with 3 stars or more. Since these creatures have no physical form, an inexperienced fighter will not understand how to fight. Although with such a mentor, nothing will be hidden from Eugene's eyes. Henry dictated every step to him at first, but over time, he himself began to worry about his master, especially now that Patrick was nearby. All these experiments were giving me the creeps. The ancient writings in the records gradually became clearer. If this book wasn't another collection of nonsense, Patrick was willing to help. After all, they had recently become friends. He didn't forget that he swore allegiance to him, did he? I wonder if he could trust Eugene with his life if he had to. However, we still have to live to see that happen. This guy was obviously very strong, but he went too far in his experiments. He risks remaining in them forever. Eugene, when he began to do whatever he wanted, it was impossible to get the young man out of his thoughts. If he doesn't trust Henry anymore, let him at least listen to Patrick. In fact, he could only hear himself. This was not the first time he had felt this whirlwind of energy. It's just that for a while, mana became unavailable to him. But now history seemed to be repeating itself. Before him, he saw the fusion of two energies that barely touched. Patrick tried to stop him at the last moment, but was too late. The two streams of energy instantly merged into one thread. Did it work? Not quite so. Everyone had warned him about this. Luckily, Henry was a spirit and was in no danger. He didn't yet understand what was happening, but the experiment had obviously failed. That's why Teresa tried to tell him something he didn't know yet. Eugene was brave, but sometimes bravery goes too far. Luckily, Eugene raised his hand, indicating that he was alive. However, Eugene succeeded in doing what Patrick had failed to do for 6 months. He developed incredibly quickly, which surprised not only Teresa. Bernard told me to tell the boy to defeat the demon in 1 month. Maybe that's why he overdid it so much today? All these books became useless, because he learned their essence in practice. At that moment, loud footsteps were heard outside the door. Clara didn't know anything yet, and went to Eugene with an urgent report. She was in a hurry to convey a message from Bernard about the timing of the initiation ceremony. When she opened the door, she realized something new about this young man. In essence, the initiation rite had already been completed, but now it was necessary to help 2 brave men. She guessed which of them was the one who started it. Eugene tried to explain that it was he who had started the experiment with the manuscripts. How could he decide to do such a thing, knowing that everyone was worried about him? That's how it happened. At first, Clara was at a loss for words. Whatever the case, they need to hurry. After all, Bernard had already issued a decree that they must complete the ritual within a month. Before, my father had never changed the dates, but now everything was different. Well, that's even for the better. In a month, she herself will accompany them as a protector. You have to try. This concerns both of them. To be honest, Eugene was already going a bit overboard. From that very day on, Sophia was ready to burst into tears at any second. But there was no need to worry so much, because they didn't summon demons at all. Sophia protected him in his past life just as she does now. And this girl knew much more about him than everyone in this house. Hey, what's that look? The girl suddenly ran out of the room, slamming the door. Nobody even said a word to provoke such a scene. All the better. You can reactivate the ability and try something else. He managed to connect the 2 energy streams and completely restore the mana circuit. Did he really complete the flow? Yes, this time he succeeded and could do it again. Henry always knew that a talented person is capable of anything. So it turns out he doesn't have to wait a month to exceed his father's expectations. Without wasting any time, they headed into the forest for a walk. True, wandering through the forest and not using magic would be boring. He was already ready to show what he was capable of. Patrick also had to be prepared in case the experiment failed. The same was true for Henry, although it was easier for a disembodied spirit in this sense. Just like last time, there could have been an explosion. But Patrick wanted to see everything with his own eyes, and not hide cowardly behind a tree. Well, it was his choice. In this case, nothing prevented the ability from being activated and the mana was already ready. Just like the first time, the chain quickly came together into one thread. At first, everything went the same as during the first attempt. Then the energy chains began to diverge in circles around the main chain. At that moment, Henry felt as if the energy had become 10 times more powerful. It seemed to him that some kind of entity emerged along with the flow of mana, but it soon became clear that he was not imagining things. The king of the dwarves was already here, and for some time silently looked at the people below. Nice to meet you. It was mutual. And yet, first he decided to test the strength of those who dared to summon him into this world. Henry realized that Eugene had gone too far in his experiments again. An energy beam, like divine light, fell from heaven to earth. And Eugene did not open his eyes all this time, feeling what was happening with his whole being. Did it really work? And indeed, everything he saw with his inner eye was now happening in reality. The Dwarf King's blessing was the first gift to protect and strengthen the body. Great job. He really did cope with what he was given a whole month to do. It was good that this creature had come to them, but now it was time for him to return. With this power, he would be able to surpass everyone in swordsmanship. No offense, but this also applies to Patrick. What? It must be admitted that he has achieved a lot in mana control. Soon, Eugene was already there, and he was eager to tell everyone about it. In reality, he just wanted to exceed his father's expectations. He completed it in just a few days, without using the month allotted to him. That's the news. Throughout history, not a single warrior has ever completed this difficult task. Clara hopes that he will try to be an exception to this rule. She had no doubt about that. Immediately after this, the crew moved forward. There was silence in the carriage for a while. Henry decided to explain on the way that the Crimson Demon would certainly drop a valuable item. It was clear that this woman was here to keep a close eye on them. It only remains to be seen whether she knows about the thoughts that were swarming in their heads. Clara reminded him that the young master had not yet reached 3 stars, which was what she had warned him about. Come to think of it, he really never asked about the Crimson Demon. But does it matter when they've already set out on a mission? Even with his unusual swordsmanship style, he should not let his guard down. You can't mess around with the Crimson Demon. Eugene wanted to know why Clara was helping him all this time. Maybe it has something to do with stealing money? He couldn't stop thinking about it as he sat in the same carriage with her. She deliberately showed her weakness, although she hid the most important thing from him. He understands that she does not want to talk about what Bernard knows. Otherwise, she would have asked how Eugene was training. At this moment, the carriage stops abruptly. They have already arrived, and this conversation can be continued later. Fortunately, the trip was short. It turns out they are close to the Crimson Demon's lair. This monster has no name, but people have nicknamed it that way. A memorial to the first head of the family was erected after his victory over one of the archdemons. This could not have been a simple coincidence. Perhaps that is why Clara came here with him. No matter what happened, she was ready to meet any monster in this forest. This woman had enough strength to take on the challenge. Besides simple magic, she had something else at her disposal. For example, she could create a protective energy dome that surrounded them on all sides. It's amazing, isn't it? The demon lurking in the distance immediately sensed this energy. However, he was not that far away. Or rather, he was too close to them. So much the worse for him. After all, this way he will be able to apply the theory he has learned in practice more quickly. The Crimson Demon was one of the most powerful creatures and inspired fear in many hunters. But he can't stand up to 2 such masters. This was Eugene's first real combat mission. It's better to attack first. A second later, he finds himself close to the monster. He clearly had no intention of retreating, hoping to quickly finish off the boy. Their blades instantly cross, although this stump cannot even be called a blade. Eugene had a rare sword in his hands. With such a sword, he could cut through this club like a dry branch. By the way, he's been doing pretty well so far. What if we strike again? If this monster continues to stand still, it risks going to its ancestors. Just today, Eugene's energy reached its peak. What if he manages to connect the mana flows into a single chain again? The monster will probably like this. Nobody asked him to come out of ambush, and it would have been better for him to remain in the shadows. Well, the start has been made. Instead of a formidable dark warrior, he saw before him only a clumsy brute. The demon was not used to such treatment. He tries to stop the flow of mana by blocking the magic attack. It was hot. It's strange that after so many attacks, the demon is still trying to fight. The body strengthening skill could speed up the process a little. When combined with sword skill, the effect was much more interesting. Eugene realizes that there are only a few seconds left until the end of the fight. The Crimson Demon no longer resisted and its core almost fell out. And here it is. Did anyone doubt Eugene's victory? It's a pity that Clara forgot to warn him about the main thing. The Crimson Demon could not be killed in one blow. The first fight was successful, but it is not the end of the battle. The thing is, this monster had 2 lives. After his rebirth, they had another fight ahead of them. Looks like someone wants a repeat. But there was no need to worry, because Eugene had experience from a past life. Is he still here? He deftly dodges the blow and controls every step of his opponent. Not a bad try. By the way, the second attempt was better than the first. If he had hit him with a scythe, everything could have ended tragically. Fortunately, everything turned out well. But this demon is truly something to be feared. It was not for nothing that Clara insisted on special training before the start of the mission. This monster was weak at first, but in its second form it turned out to be much stronger. Eugene manages to dodge the second attack. To be honest, this is too much. I wonder what he has planned this time. With one slash, he could destroy several opponents at once. But today his opponent was only Eugene. The wall, cut in 2, looked impressive. Henry realizes that things are not going according to plan. That's if they had any kind of plan at all. But the monster was doing much better. Clara realizes that she must intervene in the duel. But then she will ruin the whole mission. She cannot protect this young man, because he must destroy the demon himself. Once upon a time, she had to make a difficult choice. It's just that this time, Clara herself found herself in Eugene's place. The help at that moment came in handy. It's just a pity that the girl didn't know how it would all end. That day, she was offered to join a group and go on a raid on monsters. Eugene's current sword used to hang on her friend's belt. It doesn't seem like a simple coincidence. The same applied to the magic stone on her hand. Eventually, Clara joined them and they went on a raid. The first monster wasn't that strong. Despite his impressive size, he had almost no strong abilities. She felt sorry for this ogre, but that was her choice. A moment later, the duel began. But in this fight, the main heroine was not Clara. The girl snuck up on the ogre when he didn't notice her, and the monster immediately lost its head. She acted so confidently, as if she had done this before. It seemed that nothing could frighten either her or her two companions. Eugene behaves in exactly the same way in the battle with the Crimson Demon. Maybe he knows what he's doing. But then a misfortune happened that crossed out her destiny as a warrior. There was deathly silence at home. The responsibility of caring for her child now fell entirely on the shoulders of her best friend. It was Clara who began to take care of him as if he were her own. The baby cried for a long time without stopping for a minute. It was as if he felt the loss of his mother, who had recently been alive. Only Clara understood that now was not the time to be sad. She needed to overcome herself and do everything for the sake of this boy's future. However, his future turned out to be quite harsh. He had to endure attacks from his older sister and suffer humiliation. He grew up rather soft and could not respond to her in the same way. Besides, he was taught a different attitude towards people and was definitely not prepared for fights. Clara had to watch this from the sidelines more than once and hear the dirt her sister was throwing at her brother. Why did she hate him so much? Eugene did the same, hoping to hear something interesting. Instead, Clara found him. She had already asked him more than once not to eavesdrop, but he was back to his old ways. Many years have passed since then. And now, before her eyes, the boy was about to be tested again. Only instead of his sister, a fierce crimson demon stood in front of him. Of course, the demon was much more terrible, because past humiliations were nothing compared to death. However, the boy also grew up and gained real strength. He was ready to stand to the end if the fight went too far. Patrick realized that instead of completing the mission, he could lose his friend. Number, who advised this boy to interrupt the fight. Patrick rushed to his friend's defense without thinking, ignoring the rules of the damn mission. Saving Eugene's life was far more important than anything else. Clara herself would have entered the duel if it weren't for the rules. But even if the demon is defeated, these two will still not be counted as winners. However, you can have a great time instead, and at the same time recharge yourself with the missing energy. Eugene's mana level was already high and he could start using it. What is he going to do? While Patrick distracted the monster, Eugene tried to meditate. It's hard to meditate in the midst of a real fight, but Eugene was almost done. It's a good thing Patrick distracted him at just the right moment. By the way, Patrick himself was quite good with his sword. The first blow hit the target. This big guy might not have to die a second time in a row. But if he decided to die twice, no one will dissuade him. It was even interesting to see what he was capable of in a real fight. Not bad. And that's all? Wait a minute, what is this? It seemed as if his strength would break the sword in two. And indeed, the monster aimed at his sword. And with the very first blow, he achieved his goal. Yes, it is very offensive. Because of a lousy demon, the guy lost his best sword. But besides weapons, he also had brute physical strength. He managed to catch the demon's scythe and hold it with his bare hands. And Eugene should hurry. Where the hell did Eugene go? He almost couldn't withstand this onslaught. But help arrived in time. The guy finished activating his mana, and now it was his turn. It was the core that kept the demon's life within itself. During the attack, he was able to leave a small crack on it. But within a second, the entire core was covered in cracks. Now you can forget about the damn demon. It must be admitted that the fireworks display was quite spectacular. What does Clara think about this? She congratulates the young gentleman, but Bernard will definitely not like such a prank. She's getting ahead of herself too much, since they only created a mana barrier for one monster. Only one of them was able to get beyond the barrier, and since the first monster died, they were faced with a second one. Exactly, the monster was already here. The victory they had just seen was in fact incomplete. When the monster gets to them, there are some things to check. He decides to use the crystal that Bernard gave him as a gift. If the crystal works, then by strengthening his body, he will be able to use the art of swordsmanship. This technique can only be performed once, but that is enough. It will take some time to determine the effectiveness of the miracle stone. One can only hope that his body can withstand it. The Crimson Demon's core is exposed when it regenerates. Apparently, the regeneration process is complete. It would be better to send him back where he came from. A second later, Eugene cuts the core in two with one blow. It seemed impossible, but he did it. It turns out that all her fears were in vain. You should have believed Eugene instead of groundlessly accusing him. He had already been through a lot during the mission. Henry finally admitted that even he makes mistakes sometimes. Now he needs to rest a little, and Clara will take care of him. Instead, he gets back to his feet, refusing to give up. Even after the battle, Eugene behaves like a mature and brave warrior. He will still need his strength on this day. A summoning circle formed around them, and that was bad news. No one warned them that they would have to face this. Henry was prepared for anything, but even he was surprised by this. It's true that nothing can surprise Clara anymore. She is ready to fight, no matter who is on the other end of the press. Over time, a new creature began to appear in the center of the summoning circle. I'm curious to see what happens this time. The monster that emerged from the summoning circle turned out to be a stone snake. The fact that such a huge guard had not been discovered earlier only meant one thing. He was created along with the temple and could now attack at any moment. Clara only wanted to know what his mission was. She realized almost immediately that, due to its ancient age, it was functioning intermittently. Everyone else needed to leave this place immediately, and Clara can go up against the giant big guy. She activates the sword art using the 7th chapter. Judging by the explosion, it worked great. Incredibly, she quickly solved the problem. The stone giant was already lying on the ground, and was no longer a threat to anyone. All that remained was to figure out where Clara herself was now. Did the stone monster really pin her down after that blow? A second later, a small crack appeared and gradually grew larger. And then it became clear that she had been prepared for this outcome from the very beginning. It was incredible, but they saw it with their own eyes. All this time, she hid her true abilities, even though she had a 7-star level. However, that was not all. In the distance, Eugene noticed another danger. He instantly charged the projectile with a huge amount of energy and directed it in that direction. All this energy rushed to where the threat was approaching from. At first, it was difficult to understand what he was planning. He actually pointed his sword into the void, as if he had imagined something. Clara soon realized what exactly the young man had seen. The guard was already here, and this was his real uniform. The worst thing is that the young gentleman did not notice his approach. The guard was so close to Patrick that it could have cost him his life. The blessed feature of the Milky Way Wanderer came in handy here. With the help of this ability, she reached her goal in a few snowy steps. These steps allowed her to be there as quickly as possible. Everything was decided with one blow. If it weren't for her, this creature could have finished off any of them. At first, she did not sense the presence of the guard in his true form. It was probably because the building was too old. Looking closer, she realized what exactly he was protecting. I wonder what was hidden inside. Moving closer to the wooden chest, she quickly opened the simple lock. For a while, Clara tried to understand why this thing was here. The dragon bone was a relic that someone left here. Wonderful. She decided to give it to the young master who deserved it. Of all his family members, he was the one who found this relic. Everyone would want this trophy, but it went to Eugene. However, he decides to do otherwise. He cuts the dragon's bone into 2 pieces. Eugene wants to give one of them to his mentor in return for her kindness. He wouldn't have been able to obtain this artifact without her help, and that was very kind of him. After this, Clara goes to the sword cemetery. This time, Bernard was also here all alone. She was pleased to report that the young master had passed his initiation. This should have been reported to the church, but she decided to report it personally. Well then, there is no point in delaying this. It turned out that Patrick was also on that mission with Eugene. But this can only mean that he could not complete the mission alone. Not quite, because he defeated another Crimson Demon on his own. And then the young man found the dragon bone left by the first leader, and he shared half of this bone with Clara. Suddenly, Bernard points out that she's not telling the whole story. It would be better to just break this dragon bone. It is better not to argue with your master's orders. It's a pity, but the rare relic had to be broken. She wondered for a long time why he wanted this. Before this, Clara asked her ancestors for forgiveness for this insolence, and the next second she unleashed all her energy on the dragon bone. At first, she wanted to freeze the bone and then crush it into pieces. But the ice, touching the dragon bone, shattered into small pieces. What was that? She used her strongest attack, but even that didn't help. As it turned out, this young man had a special power, and it was Clara who had to find out all about it. That's right. From that moment on, her main responsibility became looking after Bernard's son. Meanwhile, Vincent met the young gentleman unable to hold back his tears. Sophia asked him to calm down, because after such an ordeal, he needed rest. Soon he himself will need to go to the Crimson Fortress. The Crimson Fortress is always full of scary monsters, but Vincent can't escape it. It's strange that a street thug was afraid of monsters. In the midst of their argument, Eugene notices one detail. This girl's mana was a little strange. It felt like he had known her for much longer than a few days. He asked what the girl's real last name was. By the way, she had a magical body, like other members of her destroyed family. It was the first time Henry had heard anything like this. Some members of her family had the ability to create a magical body. It is this that prevents death from the sacrum. He probably doesn't yet know why the maid came to this house. The girl admitted that her grandmother had died, and she was her only relative. There is no need to apologize, because Eugene himself had a difficult life. It's strange that such a family eventually went down the drain. They must have been trying to hide the existence of the divine sacrum. Suddenly, she remembers the young master's mother. It turned out that that lady was also from the same family. Eugene had heard nothing about this because of the prohibition to mention her name out loud. Bernard looked too sad when he heard her name. If this is true, then the man was hiding something all this time. This lady hired people into her home even from broken families. Even Clara was once at rock bottom before she came here. His mother was an amazing person. And here she is. The chief chamberlain was already here to remind us of something. Patrick was already leaving, wanting to see everyone one last time. The Crimson Demon had already been killed and had no reason to stay here. Finally, Eugene wanted to ask for something. He wanted him to study the history of his family going back 500 years. Perhaps he will find a mention of his mother's youthful love. There won't be any problems with that. As he says goodbye, he shakes his hand firmly, hoping to see him soon. Their acquaintance began with enmity, but now they have become great friends. Thanks to the mission, he learns a lot about his mother, and Clara probably foresaw this. He wanted to ask for one favor, not as a master, but as a good friend. Eugene needs training before he goes to the Crimson Fortress. After all, no one but Clara could teach him the best techniques. The request was a bit unexpected. I wonder what his mother would say about this. If his request is serious, then you shouldn't expect mercy from her. Good enough. The next day, everything was ready to start training. Eugene could have gotten the feature even without having an image. If he himself, as a martial arts master, asked for it, he will know everything. But first, you just need to pick up a sword. Clara doesn't want to use the sword from the initiation ceremony. He will meet that sword only when he is worthy of taking it. Now you can try to hit her with a regular weapon. Didn't she see what he did to the demons in the forest? It's stupid to think that she could be hurt by such a simple ability. Rather, he himself can easily fall on her blade. As expected, the training began with Eugene's attack. Clara knew the power of the way of the sword, but even she didn't expect such speed. By the way, she just almost pierced his eye. Was she seriously aiming for his eyes? Didn't she warn him that she wouldn't be too soft with him? A week later, he got used to the rigorous training. Over time, Eugene himself became quite confident. His opponent was at his best, but he was almost as good as her. And yet, he was too slow to consider himself the best. At this rate, he risks losing to every strong opponent. If they continue at this pace, he will become exhausted. That's enough for today, and we can continue tomorrow. A little more, and the blade will break. Luckily, there was a forge nearby that could fix the problem. This master was the most famous blacksmith and helped her out more than once. It's just a pity that he had to carry out stupid assignments. Charlie wasn't expecting any guests today, but he knew this woman well. It's just strange that she came on such a day. No one had ever allowed themselves to break into his place at night with work. But if he takes a closer look, he will understand what the matter is. She had been using these swords for the past week and they were seriously worn out. Yes, it was noticeable right away. These cuts on the blade can only be explained by a fight with a monster with sharp teeth. Clara unexpectedly replies that everything was a little different. She had to fight the Crimson Lotus, which is more serious than any monster. He had no idea that the young master had a Crimson Lotus at his disposal. He wanted to see it for himself when he saw him that night. Clara apologized for calling him at such a late hour. However, the master actually managed to create a Crimson Lotus. Charlie had taken on orders like these before, and knew his business well. By the way, he was the most famous blacksmith in the settlement. Several decades ago, he stopped making great swords and focused on simple weapons. Since then, the great swords of his forging were considered extremely rare. With their help, one could go on any raid. If he agreed to forge one of these swords, the young master would reward him generously. Payment needs to be discussed separately, and yet this funny guy was able to make him laugh. Eugene behaved with a courtesy that was not typical of the heirs of noble families, so he pushed Charlie to the right decision. Many years ago, he met a man who did not like this family. Yes, Ralph was first on that list. The blacksmith was very helpful in defeating Father Eugene, although Charlie now regrets it. It seems to be a family trait. But looking at him now, he realizes that it was all just a lie. I needed to take a closer look at the Crimson Lotus. It was with this sword that he had to fight the Crimson Demon. He also used this blade during his training with Clara. However, there was not a single scratch on the sword. It seemed as if he was chopping not with a blade, but with the power of his mana. Charlie asks what style of swordsmanship he uses. If he really plans to carry the Crimson Sword with him, it's worth mentioning. But today, he had already used his sword skill twice. It's good that Sophia was nearby at that moment. She was unhappy that they were making noise while the others were sleeping. Charlie had long known that it was not worth arguing with this girl. Otherwise, she will throw such a tantrum that everyone will be in trouble. Just don't worry so much. If this little brat has something like this in mind, he will go for it. He is ready to do anything just to get out of here. Well, all that remains is to wish him good luck. In fact, Charlie was right about a lot of things. Even with a wooden sword in his hand, Eugene would be dangerous to the enemy. It was mana that provided the strength for his blows. Watching him train, Charlie was convinced of this. This guy used a pretty weird technique. Now it is clear why they gave him the Crimson Lotus. At this training session, Eugene showed his main techniques. With this, he easily interested the blacksmith. He even agreed to forge a special sword for him. Such a sword does not exist yet. It only exists in Charlie's drawings. He had been planning to make it for a long time, but there was no suitable opportunity. It seems the time has come. What did he do to deserve this? Maybe he really is a great fighter. Or is it something else? It's incredible, but the sword will be forged from a mastodon horn. That's right. The horn will be the blade's edge. This weapon will become his most brilliant creation and will take him to a new level. Nobody argues with that. Just don't shout like that. He doesn't want Sophia to come here again. Better get down to business. After these words, Eugene hands him the sword that his father once owned. The Crimson Lotus was a wonderful weapon and contained powerful energy. However, 3 weeks later, something terrible happened. The workshop burned down and all of Charlie's work was in vain. This was definitely not an accident. We need to find out who found out about this order. You need to pull yourself together and not give in to your feelings. This fact obviously shocked the young maid. The first thing to do was to rescue Charlie from there. It's scary to think what's happening to him now. If you act thoughtlessly, something irreparable will happen. Unlike the others, Eugene had a plan. He immediately rushed to the window, which was engulfed in flames. But the iron bars are no obstacle for him. There. Luckily, old Charlie was still alive. It took a little more time to get him out of here. True, they missed something. It seems the dragon bone was much stronger than they thought. It seemed as if she filled everything. If they hesitate, they risk being caught under the burning rubble. Unlike Eugene, Mr. Charlie has nothing to defend himself with. No way. Devil. It seems like they are in a ring of fire and there is no way out. What should we do? Even a dragon's bone cannot hold back the flames forever. Besides, this sword technique is only defensive. We must remember that in his past life, he could do much more. If that had happened then, this problem would not have stopped him. Eugene has to handle it. Otherwise, it's all in vain. The soft sword could actually cut through steel. And he will certainly be able to cut through a couple of burning logs. Henry will have to believe that he sees before him the mastery of the ruling family. Incredibly, one swing and the fire was extinguished. And he did it. Eugene gave it his all, but it was the first time he had succeeded. Mr. Charlie must be very surprised when he finds out everything. But now it didn't matter, because his life was no longer in danger. He has yet to discover exactly how this technique was used. How he missed that grumpy Charlie. But he still thinks it was a dream, even though the artifact proved otherwise. The sword was finished and now belonged to one owner. Eugene walked straight towards him. It seemed as if he had already held this sword in a past life. As soon as he touched the sword, his power was activated. Yes, it does resonate with Eugene's mana. Just like his mana, the sword's energy streams were connected in circles. It was no wonder that the sword began to resonate with his mana. Something wrong? If the fire was started by the head of the family, he should have known how the dragon bone would behave. And I would probably have left it for such a case. By the way, as a reward for saving Charlie, he could forge him another sword. If this sword is so good, the next one will definitely be even better. But the trouble was, they no longer had such dragon bones. In this he is wrong. The second half of the dragon bone went to Clara. Soon she brought him this bone to make a sword out of it. And she specially saved it, because she knew what a rare artifact it was. Well, this woman knew how to convince people. On the way back, Clara thought for a long time about what had happened. Just think how quickly the young master mastered this technique. By the way, here he is. At first, Eugene wanted to share the bone with her, but unfortunately he had to take it back. In fact, she received her payment for the dragon bone 14 years ago. It happened on the day Eugene was born. In that case, she will be overjoyed now. He knows a way to defeat a 7-star martial artist. And today, with this technique, he will defeat Clara herself. That remains to be seen. Everything was already ready for the training fight. There was so much mana, as if this wasn't just training. From the first seconds, Eugene feels how strong she is. Yet this is not enough to defeat him. However, this warrior had other tricks up her sleeve. He promised to win, but now he was close to defeat. This is easy to understand, since Eugene could only defend himself. But without the ability to attack, he risked losing. At the last moment, he manages to repel the attack. A little more and Clara's blade would have hit him right in the chest. Didn't they agree to have a normal training match? But now she fights as if it were a real fight. Well, I'll have to show her my new technique. She probably doesn't expect him to move that fast. This time he will use completely different flows. I wonder how strong the Crimson Lotus is now. This sword did not break even after her strongest attack. In his hands, he held a sword that absorbed the characteristics of its owner. It must be admitted that the Crimson Lotus is becoming stronger. Then she will try to be even tougher. Even tougher. How tough can this warrior be? She could not only attack, but also move quickly. It took some concentration to figure out where she was. He decides to go all in, hoping that the mana will help. And that was the wrong move. Nobody said that this move would be the last. Instead, she should have been watching his movements. He managed to grab the sharp blade of the sword with his bare hand. This is impossible. At his age, he was as strong as a grown warrior. Clara will no longer need this sword. Having snatched the weapon from her hands, he decides to make a final attack. After a powerful blow and a couple of clever moves, she is unarmed. Instead of winning this duel, Clara loses her sword. By the way, here he is. He doesn't want to defeat his opponent easily, especially if she lost her sword. In fact, with this gesture, he showed his arrogance. Eugene's stronger opponents will not sympathize with him. If a real enemy were in Clara's place, such an act could cost him his life, and he must learn this lesson as soon as possible. How will he respond to her strongest attack? It's better to understand this now, so that you don't become an easy target in the future. She rushes towards him to teach him this lesson. However, even Clara needs to stop sometimes. Stay, and get a light flick on the forehead. Eugene reminds that there are only 4 months left before the move to the Crimson Fortress. Of course, it cannot be touched even by a double blow of the sword. However, he was able to cut through the mana around her, and the strike became possible. That's how he simply blocked her ability. This young man exceeded all her expectations. Now she is ready to tell him something else. We are talking about a blessing, a flow of mana from the Galaxy Wanderer. This power belonged only to her for a long time. But now Eugene can use it too. To do this, you will have to learn a new technique in just 2 days. When he directs the flow of mana through the circle, the power will manifest itself. All that remains is to wait. I would like to believe that with such a size, it will not break through the roof. It looks like it's ready. Now, besides Henry, there is another flying spirit in the room. Meanwhile, in the Crimson Fortress, a big job awaited someone. Norman reminds Helga about the documents that need to be studied. I had to listen to my partner, otherwise he wouldn't leave me alone. To her surprise, one of the documents mentioned Eugene. If she is right, the heir of the main family should appear here soon. And before this happens, you need to get rid of all the problems. However, Henry now has one small problem. What kind of creature is this? Eugene remembered those features of the Galaxy Wanderer that were unfamiliar to Henry. The low temperature of his mana was one of those features. With its help, you can leave no traces even in the snow. This ice ball could now become another ability. The Crimson Fortress is a huge structure that bears little resemblance to an academy. She is in this place. In the past, when the Archdemon's followers invaded this house, the defenders were able to fight them off. Perhaps it was the dragon bone that helped them that day. There is a legend that a completely different treasure is hidden in that place. Instead of a dragon bone, you can find a divine fruit. What if there is a whole tree growing there with such fruits? I was daydreaming. It turns out that their next target will be the divine fruit. Once they are accepted into the academy, they will only have 9 years of training left. Damn it, it's been forever. There is no need to be so reckless. In the Crimson Fortress, you will have to survive without financial support from your family. You can forget about a life of luxury. Henry could be counted on for this. He had already invested in a place called the 6th Magic Tower. Eugene will be able to sponsor the research of the mages in this tower, and the investment will pay off. For example, Henry has already invested in one talented magician. It was he who recently became a co-owner of that tower. The only problem is that the investment will be worthless if the mage dies. With dark forces always surrounding the tower, it could happen at any moment. At any time, it may have already happened. If so, it's worth coming up with another way. It's hard to understand why Henry didn't think of this beforehand, since he could have saved the magician. There was no point in shedding tears now. However, Eugene manages to find information about the will left by this magician. Norman probably knows a lot more about this. He was also born into the family of this magician, although he was never as talented. It would be more correct to say that Norman was considered a disgrace to his family. And yet there are only 4 months left. They must collect all available information. 4 months later, guests were awaited in the mountains of the Crimson Fortress. Clara could only accompany them to the foot of the mountain. They would have to walk from there. However, this was not a big problem. If you don't take into account how far away that Crimson Tower is, this is not the first time that Clara has been there at the right moment. They still have a lot to do. And now it's worth relying on Eugene in everything. This young man knows what to do, despite his age. Meanwhile, Helga's troubles were just beginning. Lately, monsters have been invading more and more often, and the crystal might not be able to withstand it. They broke into residential buildings in the area, but no suitable magician was found. Why didn't he say this before? It's finally going to be fun. Yes, it was more interesting than any ride. Perhaps Norman would like to repeat something similar. Unlikely. It was much safer to be near the guards in the usual way. Finding himself opposite, he demanded to know where the young gentleman was now. They noticed him from afar just as he arrived here. It's worth seeing for yourself. Strangely enough, the chief chamberlain of their family was with the boy. He knew well about Clara's abilities, but her attitude towards the matter made him think. Besides, the boy was good for nothing before. Norman decides to personally monitor the process and not leave Eugene's side for a single step. In any case, he was going to get rid of all the unnecessary interference anyway. The conquest of the illusory monster will begin much earlier than he expected. Meanwhile, the travelers continued their slightly drawn-out journey. Vincent notices something interesting ahead. The Crimson Fortress turned out to be much larger than he had imagined. But in order to climb the mountain, you will have to work hard. And yet, once they get there, they will be able to have a good rest. No one at the local hotel warned us about another obstacle. For example, about the local forest monsters. Well, a little warm-up never hurt anyone. We'll have to draw the blade a little earlier. The last 4 months of training with Clara had not been in vain for Eugene. And there's no point in hiding in the shadows. He's already been noticed. A second later, he sees the monster's paw in front of him. It becomes clear that the most powerful predator in the snowy mountain region was here. Yes, it was a blue-eyed white tiger. He warns that once the battle begins, no one should approach him. If you're going to have to fight a white tiger, you should leave it to Eugene. He asked for it himself. The monster's strength was well known, but Eugene had something to respond with. Something about all of this seemed wrong. For example, why this tiger was not like its relatives, and yet it will not affect his victory. The tiger's speed was incomparable to the young magician's movements. The bad news was that there were 2 tigers here at once. Damn it! We need to move faster. Most likely, these creatures have not yet learned to fly. But what if dozens of such mutants appear in the distance? Eugene spots enough specimens to form an army. Nobody warned them about this. Blue-eyed white tigers don't usually travel in groups. But today was a special day. It turns out that they are just illusions created by magic. I wonder who controls this illusion. Norman realizes that he has been exposed. This boy knows much more than his peers. He even knows about those monsters that do not live in their lands. If they manage to hold out, they will soon run out of mana. This method was based on using one spell instead of several. In other words, Eugene only needs to find one illusion, and all the others will disappear. He will be able to find her because she is controlled by a human, and this person will try to protect the connecting element. Well, that's even interesting. What if we get closer to these illusory monsters? It is clear that another creature is watching them through the eyes of the monsters. And this sly fellow will learn something new today. In an instant, Eugene manages to appear in front of the connecting element. This is him. The connecting element of this spell was already opposite. However, Norman could not be fooled. The boy had planned a rather cunning move, but he had a couple of giant monsters in reserve. They were just an illusion, but death from them would be very real. An absolute cut of the sword in union with a blessing should help. Indeed, the absolute changes in the sword's sensitivity allowed the mana power to increase. Even Norman felt it. If possible, it is worth sending them flying beyond the path of the sword. He didn't destroy the illusion. He only disconnected the real mana chain. This young man was deeply versed in magic. It's strange that he doubted it. Even a simple guard realized that Norman's magic had been completely destroyed. He orders the gates to be opened and the young master to be greeted. The guard immediately carries out the order. Eugene's entire team arrived just in time. Now any examinations are unnecessary and travelers need to be let in. From the outside, the fortress looked enormous and its scale was truly astounding. Norman personally meets Eugene and his entire group. He announces that they have successfully passed the first test, which was the illusory tigers. Nobody doubted it. Henry reminds that a talented student can find a sponsor within the walls of the fortress. Now they will be able to earn a lot of points. Let them prepare their wallets for a new talented magician. Although the city seemed crowded at first, there were actually quite a few people living there. Norman explains that living in a dorm won't be very comfortable. Eugene will have to temporarily become a cadet and lose all his statuses. That was the last time he was treated with respect. True, there are some things that can brighten up his life. Sophia is delighted that the young gentleman will soon be wearing a uniform. I would like to find out what rank he had now. All cadets start at rank 9 and advance through examinations. It will take at least 4 years to release here, but don't forget about the divine fruit. By the way, the guy did a good job of spotting the connecting element among the blue-eyed tigers. No one at that age had ever managed to do something like that. In the past, he was terrible at martial arts, but Henry could help with that. The young man's confidence was not only due to his talent and insight, he must be hiding something. By the way, Eugene also wanted to ask about something. For example, about how he can get the divine fruit. How does he know about this? However, this was not a secret, because the divine fruit itself chooses its owner. The dean probably knows a lot about this too. The meeting with the dean will take place very soon. In the meantime, they approach the entrance to the hostel. Finally, they are here. Eugene's servants will live on the first floor. The sun badge will need to be worn at all times to help distinguish you from other cadets. Well, that's not a bad decoration. And yet, something was clearly missing in this room. He will have to get used to a new greeting used to address superiors. Now Eugene was only a 9th rank cadet. After a short time, the real life of a cadet began. Opening the door, he realized that everyday life would be harsh. Everyone had already lined up in 2 rows, and were waiting for the order from their senior in rank. Not one of the cadets could utter a word without his permission. To be honest, the atmosphere here is not so-so. Maybe I should turn around and go home before it's too late. But Rupert won't let them go that easily. The big guy was glad that another newcomer had come under his command. This bastard used to bully Henry the most. Suddenly, Henry's memories flooded into his charge's head. They may have been just a figment of his imagination, but they seemed absolutely real. Yes, Rupert bullies the weak every day, using his status. I want to make him remember everything he did in the past. Suddenly, Eugene decides to make the first move. He greets him as if they were old friends. But their relationship was not close enough for such conversations. It was just a clever move. By the way, it was strange that Rupert was still the same 9th-rank cadet as he was. What did he say? Did he hear things wrong, or did this newbie just try to humiliate him? Gabriel shouldn't have said a word without Rupert's permission. He already warned me that I had to raise my hand before making a sound. He was merciless to everyone in this place, without exception. It is worth remembering this gesture, which will come back to him. And it could happen much sooner than he expects. Moreover, these two were so similar, as if Ronald had been reborn in Rupert's body. And that was the last straw. Actually, he wanted to put this conversation off until later. I'll have to talk to him a little earlier and knock out a couple of his extra teeth. After such a blow, they are unlikely to be able to become good friends. Never before had the students seen anything like it. It's clear that they wanted to see it, and yet it was unexpected. Well, that's not a bad hit. What will he say if the big guy tries to respond in kind? Calmly. You just need to control your emotions and focus on Rupert's movements, and then counterpunch right to the jaw. This big guy might want to fly a little. True, the landing will be a bit hard. Great, he likes it better this way. It's strange that these cadets allow him to mock them like that. Even seeing how he humiliates Gabriel, they just watch silently. Yes, this brat decided to ruin what he worked so hard on. They have long since become obedient puppets, and must remain so. He won't allow a newbie to interfere in his affairs. With any luck, this skirmish could become a new opportunity for Eugene. All you need to do is survive today. At the same time, in the village near the fortress, they were preparing for the hunt. A whole mountain of monsters had already been destroyed. Now, local residents can sleep peacefully thanks to Helga's efforts. It's a shame she doesn't want to stay a little longer and have a couple of drinks. I'm sure Norman wouldn't mind. It was understandable why he was so angry, and insisted that she stay at least for a little while. A hearty dinner and good drinks were quite fair payment for the effort. I had to agree and go to a local bar. By the way, Norman has already noticed that the newcomer is not as weak as Helga assured him. He destroyed something that was unknown even to a 7-star martial artist. It became known that Snow Mountain was destroyed by other direct heirs. He must be very happy to have found an opponent on his own level. But it wasn't about that, it was about the artifact he could get. If the boy is so strong, he will take not only the magic fruits but something else as well. By the way, he had already managed to get into trouble and demanded a duel himself. This duel between the two cadets was scheduled for the next day. After that skirmish, Eugene and Rupert could only settle their dispute in combat. The dorm manager, Harry, agreed to fulfill Eugene's request and be the judge. And of course, if Norman himself doesn't mind. Even though Rupert was the one causing the riots, for the first time they decided to turn a blind eye to it. Today's fight was supposed to decide everything. The duel has been officially cleared, which means the blade can be drawn. That's right. His opponent was holding a Crimson Lotus in his hands. Rupert was sure that it was just a copy of the original Crimson Lotus. He was willing to bet his right hand to prove it was a fake. Great bet, worth remembering. I think he was talking specifically about the right hand, right? However, he instantly used his suppression ability and seized the initiative. The aura immediately spread throughout the hall, affecting even the spectators. At the beginning of the fight, it seemed like this guy was no good. But now you could forget everything Henry had said about this guy. It turns out that Eugene got a pretty strong fighter today. And this is just another reason to use your true ability. What ability exactly are we talking about? Does he really want to use all of the Crimson Lotus's mana in battle? There was no need to rush, because the suppression energy did not work. The boy must have pulled some kind of trick, but since you couldn't win at a distance, you can move on to close combat. He had enough excellent techniques in his arsenal for this. Did anyone here still hope to win? Wait, where is he? A second ago, this guy was right in front of him. Turning around, he realized that he was faster. No, he is definitely hiding something, otherwise this power cannot be explained. Even Rupert had a hard time in the first minutes. If this is true, then his worst fears have come true, and in his hands he really did have the legendary sword. It took only 1 minute. This was enough to understand who was the best here. The words the boy said 2 days ago turned out to be true. Emma hadn't seen such agility in a duel for a long time. She had already heard a lot of interesting things about this newcomer. It was no wonder that Gabriel noticed him at their first meeting. It's strange that such a strong fighter didn't choose another place to train. He could have joined the elite group instead of wasting his time in this fortress. That was the whole point, because Eugene did not come here for training. All he needs is the magic fruit. But first he needs to clear a couple of obstacles in his way. One of these obstacles was standing in front of him right now. There was only hope that Rupert would not want to continue this fight. But a second later, it became clear that he had no intention of losing. This is madness. He uses the blessing of the intelligent giant as his last hope. He's crazy. If he uses such a technique, the average mana level will not be enough. To win the bet, Eugene needs to come up with something else. There is so much destructive energy in this guy. From a distance, it looked like he was completely covered in a demonic aura. From a young age, he bullied Henry, using his abilities in every possible way. But today, he had a chance to remember everything. He had this feature since birth, but he mastered it only recently. After arriving at the fortress, he discovered something like a natural talent in himself. He just didn't think it was necessary to show it before, although there was something else interesting. Even with his suppression ability, no one could get the better of him. When Rupert came of age, he entered the fortress as a senior apprentice. Unlike others, he doesn't have to work hard to master the techniques. But is this the right way to use your talent? His talent allows him to achieve in a couple of years what others strive for their whole lives. He uses it as if his natural gift were just a pastime. If only he knew what Eugene was willing to give for this all those years ago. It will be clear now. Why talk too much when you can check everything in action? If he's so talented, he should dodge it. It must be admitted that this guy's strength is really high. Even Eugene's speed might not help. The first few seconds were a bit of a struggle. So far, I've managed to dodge and make Rupert nervous. But this was only the beginning of the duel between the two strongest students. Norman should be more careful with them. Otherwise, they will tear everything here to pieces. Even Sophia was in danger after Rupert's attack. Stones fell from the ceiling, and she chose the wrong place. We need to hurry, if he doesn't want to see the worst. However, help was already close. Norman noticed the maid there from afar and arrived just in time. His magical barrier is capable of stopping even more serious threats. It's just strange why Harry didn't do his duty. Just a little more and we can consider the matter finished. Wait a minute. This girl had so much mana that she was able to protect herself. At this point, Rupert was unstoppable. He was ready to do anything to get rid of this problem. It's a shame that Eugene's problem ended up under his foot. Damn these stones. The opponent noticed his vulnerability and continued the attack, eventually causing the guy to collapse to the floor. It happened at a moment when the energy weakened. His limit is probably only enough for one big jump now. Norman made a mistake by allowing this fight. His barrier could correct this mistake. There is much less room left to dodge attacks. It seemed like he wanted to help this big guy, not Eugene. It is difficult to use absolute cut in this position. Suddenly, Henry advised him to cut something else. To win, you need to do this as quickly as possible. Well, I'll have to trust my little mentor's strategy. And it is advisable not to forget that Rupert's attacks continue. Luckily, he managed to dodge the next wave of energy. He made this jump, spending the last of his ice mana on it, and Rupert's fiery mana was just at the ready. He releases it all without a trace to finish off the upstart. He bought it. Now you just need to make a light cut, as Henry advised. One can only hope that he was right. If everything works out, the barrier will be no worse than Norman's. When the fire and ice energy came into contact, an explosion immediately occurred in that place. You have to be careful not to get hit by flying rocks. After such an explosion, there were plenty of them here. Some people are having a hard time right now, while others were at their best. Well, how is he? Is he okay? Great. Then it's time to move on to the last step. Perhaps one more blow will silence him forever. He didn't forget that his hand was at stake in this bet, did he? If so, there was someone here to remind you of it. Eugene actually cut off his hand in response to everything he did. It was a little painful. Norman can't stop the fight, because those were the rules. It was pretty brutal, but Eugene didn't break the terms of the fight. Suddenly another guest appears here. Priest Jacob discovered something valuable. This relic was among the things that Eugene brought to the fortress. What's wrong with this relic? Jacob wants to know the truth about why Eugene had something like this. This symbol gives him the right to the same treatment as his previous owner. In other words, Eugene should be treated the same as the owner of the relic. Its previous owner must be well known to Jacob. If I had the strength, it would be nice to return a lost arm to one asshole. That's right. It was Rupert we were talking about. How wonderful it is when lost hands come back. Not so fast. That remains to be seen. Besides, Eugene might change his mind. Yes, he can change his mind. That's it. Nothing can be done about it. Puppy. It's nice when the intended revenge turns out even better than planned. None of the students had ever seen Rupert in such a state. Not only did he lose the fight, but he also lost his arm. This should have been thought of earlier. If someone wants their hand back, they have to shout louder, even louder. That's better. Priest Jacob begins the healing at the personal request of the owner of the relic. Well, I'll be damned, it's as good as new. And he got scared, the coward. Many wanted to become strong like Eugene, but not everyone can do it. The magician can do this only by overcoming his deepest fears. Judging by her face, this girl had more than her share of fears. This fearless little guy needs to work on controlling his emotions. You shouldn't make hasty decisions, especially at a time like this. Even if you want to take revenge, sometimes you need to act wisely. Will he really lose his arm again right after healing? Norman was the one who could easily arrange this, if he so wishes. Actually, I don't want that at all. Eugene outdid himself today. Within a week, there was not a single student left who had not heard of this magician. It's customary here to show respect to elders. Norman realizes that he is getting used to the local customs quite quickly. It's embarrassing to admit, but this young man will become the direct heir, and Norman will remain a simple mercenary. It turns out that Norman knew who he was from the very beginning. But Eugene came to him on purpose, right? Now I want to know what his purpose is. It's not quite what he thought. He originally came here to find the divine fruit, but over time his plans changed. What does it mean? Norman was once a talentless child who was oppressed by everyone. In this they are similar, because Eugene also experienced a lot in his childhood. That was true, but Norman's decision was immutable. It's funny that one day he escaped from the magic tower and became a mercenary. Unlike Eugene, he did not keep in touch with his family. He acted like an idiot that day. After hearing this story, Eugene did not want to joke about it at all. Too much in this story was familiar to him and reminded him of his life. But now the lives of the students here will change completely. They already understood that there was no need to be afraid of this big guy. Norman will never harm anyone again because he was defeated. Some young brat defeated him in front of all the students. It's such a shame. Suddenly he notices a flash overhead. It was as if a dark entity had appeared right next to him. If someone is thirsty for revenge, this creature is ready to help. By the way, it was Rupert who was embarrassed in front of all the students, right? His family had been the most famous in the governing magic tower for many generations. That is why he could not renounce his last name. Eugene is just a child and can't know this, and there is no need to teach him life lessons. He seemed to have forgotten that he still didn't have a single star. Right. What? Eugene was the same way at the beginning of his first life and understands the feelings of someone no one believes in. But at the same time, he remembers the love that his mother gave him. Norman certainly hasn't forgotten about this. These words made him briefly travel back to his past. Although the guy was not yet ready for such conversations, he was very different from his peers. Norman's sister was a talented and bright sorceress, but her radiance caused the boy even more suffering. For a long time he could not withstand such pressure. He thought he could see right through people, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. It's funny that he only realized this after Eugene's words. So it's worth talking about the main thing. Since he decided to invest in a magic tower, it must be a lot of money. Now Norman is ready to become his sponsor, and there is no need to worry about all the expenses. He really knew how to choose his words. I wonder who whispered all these words to him. Yes, Henry had some credit for that. Now Eugene could be congratulated on acquiring a new sponsor. Emma should have believed her friend about this talented guy. He managed to get sponsorship from the dean, which meant he really had something. It's always nice to have such talented friends. She was responsible for reporting to the teachers and can help many in the future. At this moment, he notices one peculiarity. Although Helga was not comparable in strength to his birth mother, they had a lot in common. If you look closely, there are even too many. Wait a second. She doesn't even have an image. Besides, he doesn't like this way of meeting someone when someone uses their ability. He guessed everything. Then it is worth answering why Eugene walks at night in forbidden places. It is too dangerous to do this, because he might simply get lost in such an environment. If he falls into the hands of an evil ghost, no one will help him. I wonder what other evil ghosts they are talking about. Has he never heard of the evil ghost of the castle? After the archdemon lost the fight to the hero, his spirit began to wander throughout the world. These thoughts make me feel hot. This archdemon is so terrible. It turns out that the supreme demon really existed in these places. From time to time, his victims are found, and yet Helga doubted the veracity of this story. Could the evil spirit that appeared 500 years ago be here? It would be better to ask Rupert about this. After all, right now he saw this evil spirit right before his eyes. Nice meeting, wasn't it? In fact, this creature could help him in many ways. He can help him achieve his goal faster if he agrees. It is Rupert who must be the next king and reclaim his throne. To do this, you will have to step over your fear. Meanwhile, the students were returning back to the room. It was already too late, so everyone else was already asleep. Gabrielle was on night watch, and it was still too early for her to sleep. Eugene immediately noticed what Gabrielle did not see. Rupert's bed was empty. It's a pity that Gabrielle didn't know anything about this. As always, she carried out her service on the street where there was not a soul. However, there was still one soul here. It's a pity that she wasn't as bright as Gabrielle's soul. There was someone ahead. He clearly didn't like it when someone shone a light in his face. The easiest way was to cut off the hand with the flashlight still clenched in it. What they said a few minutes ago was now coming true. Unlucky Gabrielle became the first victim of this union. It was Rupert that the spirit chose as its puppet. Are you surprised by this meeting? His appearance clearly indicated the contract concluded with him. She is very smart. Then let him figure out how to fight a demon with one hand. He quickly buries her last hope. Since she pointed the sword at the king himself, she will have to answer for it. Rupert has already written her death warrant. and this sentence will be carried out right now. Not so fast, bastard. Gabrielle realized that help was near. She was not mistaken. After all, Harry also did night duty. A contract with an evil spirit was considered the most serious crime. Killing Harry's mentor would give him even more pleasure than killing the girl. His blow did not leave a single scratch on the demon. All this time, Eugene was in the hostel. He was still trying to figure out where that bastard Rupert had gone. What if an evil spirit really did enter the dorm? At that moment, he hears the alarm sounded by the night watch. All his guesses came true. There was need to hurry. Surely Helga knows more about this than anyone else, and she was just here already. The girl had not yet been able to find out all the details, but she was the first to hear the alarm. The smell of blood came from somewhere on the street. We need to notify the dean about this urgently via Crystal. The situation has deteriorated sharply. Everyone else should follow him while Helga contacts Norman. Without wasting any time, he heads for the exit. The alarm sounded louder and louder. Suddenly the flow of mana stopped, as if the battle was already over. It may be a trick and we need to hurry if we don't hear from them. So the enemy has won. At this moment, Eugene sees one of the 7 basic demonic seals. But why did he feel this seal so close? Helga remembers that at the top of the triangle there should be a master with 5 stars. We need to check everything ourselves. There was blood. And indeed, when they opened the door, they saw traces of a crime in front of them. And then the victim itself. Can't be. Harry's mentor was dead. And the monster that arranged all this was more alive than all the living. In addition, he has already signed a contract with one of the students. Most likely his choice fell on Rupert, but that doesn't matter now. First of all, we need to repel the attack of the Dark Force. If he gives his name, there will be a chance. As expected, the evil spirit's puppet was named Rupert. Nobody doubted it. The villain lost the fight to him and now thirsted for revenge. For this, he was ready to do anything, even sell his soul to the devil. If the legend about the evil spirit was true, then Eugene was now fighting against himself. He was the evil spirit 500 years ago, and now the spirit has entered into the one who wants to kill him. Fate is ironic, damn it. Because of this, all the students were in danger. Who else but Eugene will have to defeat himself? True. This monster could have turned out to be much stronger than his current one. Eugene quickly frees the others from Rupert's hold. He easily defeated Harry, and that said a lot. Now it wouldn't hurt to have some reinforcements, which Helga requested with the help of the crystal. If they are going to arrive, they need to hurry. Until then, only Eugene can hold back this onslaught. Even if he had to use the 3-sided protective seal, there was no other choice. It seems this guy has forgotten what she warned him about. No, he remembered everything. But what was she suggesting? Eugene will stand right in the center of the seal, and then he will have a chance to win. It's strange that he decided to do this, because he doesn't even have 5 stars, and yet she should trust him. After all, Eugene had proven everything to everyone long ago. Without wasting any time, she orders a 3-sided protective seal to be formed. Too naive. You shouldn't be so sure. It will be interesting to see his face when it's all over. Henry thinks this method may not work. If you use the ice walk, they may simply run away. But is it worth running at such a moment? All the students were assembled, and each one was ready to join Eugene. The 3-sided protective seal could even destroy their mana. It would be interesting to see these idiots destroy their last chance. And it seemed that Helga knew about it too. However, Eugene decides to go all the way, hoping for the best. This is impossible. He actually manages to withstand the force of the seal. If so, this brat could contain a lot more energy. Don't underestimate your opponent, especially when you know so little about him. The dark entity inside seemed to be ordering him to attack. The 2 energies would soon converge in one blow, although both belonged to Eugene. But he, unlike Rupert, knows this very well. The enemy continues to attack in the same way as at the very beginning of the battle. I must say the attacks were very strong. Now no one could have any doubts. The legend of the archdemon turned out to be more than just a silly fairy tale. Now this fairy tale came to life right before their eyes. Rupert became the conductor of evil will, because he himself was never distinguished by kindness. You have to be stronger than your fear. Eugene orders them to hold their formation and not let fear get the better of them. He tries to cheer up the others while holding back the seal. Helga shouldn't stand idle either. All students look to her for support. As long as the fight continues, she can inspire them to fight on. This will help when the spirit gains its full power, especially since his merger with Rupert was almost complete. If they wait for the masters to arrive, the archdemon will be doomed. But if he surrenders right now, he will have a chance to survive. At this moment, the spirit tells him not to listen to these young fools, but to listen to himself. He was eager to take revenge for the humiliation, which meant his time had come. If he doesn't do it now, he never will. In a matter of seconds, his mana became noticeably heavier. It was as if he was fueling his new aura with hatred. Even Rupert's appearance changed instantly. It's hard to control such power, especially when fighting with yourself. Helga realizes that help is a little late. You have to be careful of the rocks, because they can kill someone before help arrives. And if we're not careful, It will happen even sooner. Yes, they were not used to such battles, and this was their main weakness. The protective seal could barely be contained. Rupert's powers in his new form only grew with each passing second. This blow is impossible to dodge. Eugene found himself in the very center, and the deadly blow landed right on him. And yet the magic seal worked. It is unclear how, but he was still alive. Wait, is Gabrielle still alive? Even with her arm cut off, she could still fight. Rupert knew how strong this girl was, and that's why he attacked her first. But now he saw the same Gabrielle in front of him. Devil. They force Rupert to do things he doesn't want to do. I don't care about the monster's wishes. The main thing is to hold the line. But it won't last long, because even printing has its limits. And then something incredible happens. Eugene's sword seems to begin its own attack. He didn't even intend to strike, but he saw where the sword would fly. The black path of the sword passed through Rupert's right hand. The protective seal is almost destroyed. It's time to act. A little more, and she will shatter into pieces like a broken vase. There is no time to wait. We must act on Eugene's command. Was there any command? An absolute cut in this form is the signal to attack. This naive approach only made the guy laugh. Still, I need to wipe that stupid smile off his face. The main problem is that Eugene might not have been able to get it by following the sword's path. To complete the attack, you need to get a little closer. Rupert is unlikely to let him do it that easily. He wasn't going to stand there and wait for his opponent to strike. He had a dark force on his side. With its help, he could cope alone. Hey, what is he up to? After the first attack, it became clear that Eugene was still vulnerable. His left arm is affected, and it is now much more difficult to move. But he can't retreat, otherwise he will lose his advantage. This time he'll get to him, unless Rupert is faster. This boy was too arrogant. We need to teach him a lesson. Right now, he is holding the sword with his injured hand and cannot fight at full strength. Indeed, it seemed to have immobilized his body completely. Grabbing his hand, he suppressed Eugene's aura with his aura. In his past life, he would not have had this opportunity. Perhaps Absolute Slice could help with that. Eugene decided to attack with the Helping Hand ability. The Helping Hand was able to cut off that bastard's damn hand. With one blow, he instantly regained the initiative. It took a lot of effort, but it was worth it. Now it's interesting to see how his opponent will respond. In the end, he managed to cut off his hand twice, and this is not the last good news. However, the evil spirit's aura was still somewhere nearby. He will never forgive him for this, and is ready to use all his fighting power, and then feed his corpse to the blue-eyed white tigers in the nearby forest. A fiery energy appeared in his hands, capable of burning everything to ashes. If this boy has something to counter, there is no point in delaying it. Suddenly he realized that he couldn't move again. Being paralyzed right now was too inappropriate. He couldn't just stand there and watch him launch another attack. It was at that moment that someone's paralysis ability took over Rupert's body. It is unclear who it was, but the ability worked perfectly. Turning around, he saw in front of him the same Dean who was nearby. Norman arrived just in time. His magical seal surrounded the guy from all sides, preventing him from escaping. He feels his entire body gradually being covered with a thick layer of ice. It seems there was a scoundrel here who needed to be properly punished. This is exactly why Norman prepared for the attack, and the whip in Helga's hands came in very handy. Even a martial artist who has mastered mana cannot escape from such a seal. No matter what happens, this guy is ready to do anything to win. If necessary, he will even sacrifice his life, although life no longer belongs to him. Rupert's voice immediately fell silent as his body was covered from head to toe in a layer of ice. This cooled his ardor a little, and everyone was already tired of this idiot's chatter. Eugene, however, behaved like a hero. The young man was so badly wounded that he could hardly speak. No student could have shown such endurance. At his age, many people don't even know how to control mana. Excellent work, worthy of the respect of the mentors. He can barely make out the words as everything around him gradually blurs. Emma rushes to him, hoping that he is okay. A second later, he realizes that he has moved to another space. There was no one nearby who had just been there. There was only Henry in the strange room, and he clearly didn't like it. Perhaps this is Henry's doing, and he should confess everything as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Helga was trying to figure out how to explain all this. This news is unlikely to please Bernard. He suggests skipping formalities and getting straight to the point. As you wish. Then maybe she'll finally tell us what happened. How can I tell her this without shocking anyone? Finally, she realized that there was no time to waste. There were no wounded among the 9th rank cadets, but one of the instructors was killed. Harry was the first to rush to the aid of the cadet, but fell in a mortal battle with the spirit. This damned spirit appeared just when there were only guards nearby. Unfortunately, they did not have time to properly prepare for this meeting. This news did not please Bernard, but he understood that Helga did everything right. Besides, they haven't interrogated this bastard yet. Now Rupert, tightly chained, awaited trial in prison. Contractors are granted unimaginable power in exchange for their human lives. It's hard to understand why Rupert was the one who made the deal with the spirit. According to the interrogated cadets, Rupert stopped being possessed after Eugene's blow. This boy came to the rescue again at the most dangerous moment. His fencing technique immediately struck her as strange. In that case, the first thing to do is to sort something out with Rupert. He will be under house arrest for the rest of his days. They will take away his image and cut the tendons on his arms and legs. The hero of that evening, on the contrary, should be nominated for an award. Of course, we are talking specifically about Eugene. This young hero has been unconscious for several days. They have no idea where the young man really is now. All this time, he is trying to understand why the hell he ended up here. Looking around, Henry realized that they were inside someone's memories. Are they inside Eugene's memories? But if so, then who dragged him to this place? Nothing like this had ever happened to him in his past life. No one has ever managed to penetrate someone else's memories. Suddenly, he realizes that he can see more than just his own memories. He sees Rupert refuse to train with Norman to control the sentient giant. It looks like he's talking to the Dean, and it happened before they arrived. Norman reminded him that this only made him look like a complete idiot. If he doesn't want to end up like this, he should release the intelligent giant immediately. Norman didn't just treat him like that. That day, Rupert realized he no longer had a choice. He activates his ability at the Dean's request. One has to believe that it was he who released the stream of intelligent giant mana. This would have killed someone else immediately, but the guy was quite strong. Turning around, Eugene realizes that he is completely alone. Even Henry, who usually annoyed him with his stupidities, disappeared. At that moment, the hands of his late mother appear nearby. Since childhood, she wanted this boy to die and not disgrace the family with his ugliness. Now it became clear that he had fallen into his own memories. He had experienced something similar before, and now it happened again. Only one person in the world treated him differently. But one day, Eugene lost him too. The sword that Ronald had used to kill him in the competition appeared before his eyes again. What else was here? Maybe he'll find out why that bastard did it. Why did he throw him into prison and condemn him to eternal suffering? He remembered the life he lived within these walls. The appearance of the person who appeared was well known to Eugene. Salvador was one of the few who supported him at the time. He vowed to prove his friend's innocence at any cost. He found himself in this room again. But now Eugene sees a mature warrior in front of him. For some time he tries to understand what these memories are for. Why was that meeting needed many years ago? At this point, Salvador begins to tell him the whole truth. Unfortunately, Eugene seems to have gone deaf and cannot make out a word. And then his appearance begins to gradually dissolve. They find themselves in a place without iron bars, but it still looks strange. Salvador promises that they will meet again in 500 years. After this, his appearance disappears forever, and Eugene wakes up. Wait a minute, was he really back on the fortress grounds? Yes, it was just a dream. And the guy himself had already been in the hospital for a long time. You need to recover properly before starting a new mission. His body was healed, but his thoughts needed to be put in order. But what were these memories? Why did he suddenly see the adult Salvador who visited him before his death? His awakening greatly pleased the servants. They were very surprised by such a quick healing. It is clear that they did not want to lose their master, because everything was leading to this. But now it was all over and I could finally just hug him. Just please, no unnecessary tears, although this is forgivable for Sophia. Since when does Vincent care so much about him? However, this is for the best, because at first their relationship did not work out. Besides the two of them, there was one more visitor. Helga personally came to the infirmary to see Eugene's condition with her own eyes. Perhaps she did it on Bernard's orders, in the line of duty. He greets her properly, but the girl asks to dispense with formalities. You can call her by her name, because unnecessary titles are of no use now. Moreover, after the last battle, he became a real star and could afford it. Norman had to stay in the fortress and do all the boring work. Unlike him, Helga had a more interesting task. For example, she was eager to find out exactly how she had managed to defeat Rupert. It is known that an evil spirit has entered into him and a simple student cannot compete with it. The main thing was that Eugene simply had to fight with the young master from the ruling family. This will be a normal friendly meeting to exchange experiences, and not a real fight. It's hard to believe in such friendly meetings. Usually any fight ends the same way, even friendly ones. This year the event will be special. The friendly meeting will take place in the Crimson Fortress, which means Bernard himself will be there. Eugene has a great chance to show his abilities, unless of course the guy gives in and refuses. After the fight with Rupert, it would be a strange thing to do. He probably wants to enlist Bernard's support himself, since he's here. His opponent will be the sixth son of the family, named Ethan, a fencing genius. No one has ever managed to defeat him, but now this can be corrected. This meeting can be considered a good experience that has never hurt anyone. But Eugene understands that his agreement will not please some people. Yes, he was right. But when it comes to your victories, does other people's opinions matter? By the way, Bernard was already here. The meeting with him took place a little before the start of the friendly competition. It was a little awkward that Helga behaved so freely with him. It's funny to watch her reaction after Bernard appears. Still, he's glad Eugene accepted the challenge and is looking forward to competition day. In the meantime, he should rest here a little and fully recover. This is where their conversation ends. True, the conversation with Helga is just beginning. She apologizes for going too far. The main thing is that she managed to persuade him. If he wins, Bernard will personally engrave his name on the Crimson Monument. In the fortress, there is a great monument with the names of the heroes. It is known that no cadet of the 9th rank has ever had such an honor. Maybe this time things will be different. A friendly meeting to share experiences will be the beginning of a new chapter in his life. He must win this competition at any cost. The day will come when they must overthrow the ruling family. But that time has not come yet. If Henry knew anything about this offspring, it was time to tell him now. Actually, he had some information. That guy is very strong, and it might not be possible to defeat him even with a surprise attack. The enemy was trained to the family's elite standards, and possesses at least 3 stars. The difference in strength is too great. No, this won't do. Wait, what is he up to? Eugene believes that his body has already healed, and there is no need to waste time. With these words, he goes to where his training sword is kept. Instead of listening to Henry's reproaches, it would be better to get down to business. Despite the great loss of energy, the training went well. He quickly regained his strength. At the end of the training, he meets his old friend. It's hard to believe, but it's true. Hearing about the competition, Patrick arrived to personally support his friend. These two had a lot to remember. During his absence, Patrick discovered something interesting. The discussion was about events that happened 500 years ago. There are still questions, but there are already some ideas. He himself was curious to learn about Eugene's dark past. Apart from Patrick, there was no one in his family gifted with fighting talent. Eugene's skills were very different from those of his family. Isn't it strange? After hearing his father's order, Patrick had to make a difficult choice. Ralph insisted that his son follow in his footsteps. But first you need to go to the bookshelf at the end of the room. It was there that the family's main secret was kept. After activating the magic seal, the bookshelf turned into a heavy gate, and Patrick saw a secret room in front of him. The secret room contained thousands of archival records. Everything connected with the history of their family was kept here. The ancestors treated the preservation of the archive as the main business of the family. Patrick is destined to continue this tradition. One of the books seemed particularly interesting to him. It was here that the history of Eugene's family was kept. There must be records there that will prove his innocence. But before he can find them, Patrick will have to take his father's place. And it all started so well. Don't worry, it's just a matter of time. In this case, you just need to wait a little. Suddenly, he remembered something very important. The magic crystal is intended for another person. Patrick needs to hand it over to Eugene right now. Before leaving, Charlie himself insisted on this. It was he who asked to transfer the crystal to the new owner. This old man knows how to surprise. A strange reaction, considering that the crystal was merely a recorded message. Charlie left a message about the crystal's basic function as a hologram. By the way, he had great news about the dragon bone. It is impossible to reforge a perfect sword from dragon bone. In fact, the news was so-so. It's worth listening to the end, because he found out the cause of the fire. As Charlie began to forge the Crimson Lotus, a fire broke out in the workshop. As we know, dragon bone absorbs mana, such as its temperament. Perhaps the Crimson Lotus sword was even better, since it was the one that absorbed the power and temperament of mana. And yet this news did not make him happy, unless you make another weapon out of the bone, for example a hammer. That's exactly what Charlie did. Having tried it first on a small piece of bone, he learned many of its unexpected properties. But next time he will contact only when the experiment is successfully completed. No, this old man was unbearable. It was clear what was making Patrick so happy. If necessary, he will obtain more bones for the sword. Even a message from Charlie couldn't convince him otherwise. In that case, they should have said goodbye. Patrick needed to go home for a while. Until then, Eugene had things to do. Now he has many more opportunities open to him than before. He needs to become stronger and look for new ways. If Henry hadn't wasted his time, he would have figured out how to win the competition. It seems he has forgotten about them completely. Just recently, they had a hard time defeating Rupert, and he was much weaker. They had to go through a lot to achieve this victory. If they had the blessing of the intelligent giant, it would be easier to do. But now it is impossible. As he had warned, they were able to see his abilities in Rupert's memories. But they can't use memories for their training. Or can they? Suddenly, he noticed that another creature had appeared next to Henry. If this were a memory of God, then this might be possible. I wonder how one can materialize the memories of God. Since he was so confident, it meant that he really did remember the flow of mana from the intelligent giant. Great. Actually, it's too early to rejoice. If they try to do it now, his body will simply collapse. Now they need to return to the fortress and restore his mana. By the way, that was a good idea. At the same time, Helga was just getting ready to go to the fortress. They decided to go there in the same carriage because they had a lot to discuss. Something strange was moving in that direction today. And how could it be otherwise, because this is where the ceremony of creating a new engraving will take place. He didn't know anything yet, but Bernard had already given the necessary orders. Such a ceremony required the presence of a noble person. Accompanied by young cadets, she was already ready for the ceremony. The direct heir of the ruling family was already here. The flags of all the leading families were also to appear in this place. Besides them, there was also the young man who was considered the main heir of the family. Soon, all the 6th rank cadets lined up in several rows. If everyone is ready, you can begin the ceremony. The main character was, of course, Eugene himself. It is his name that will now be written on the tablet, with the permission of the heiress of the leading family. The representative of the 9th rank cadets was also here. This honor was entrusted to Emma. Well, not bad. It would be foolish to refuse such an honor with Bernard's own permission. By the way, where is he? Yes, Bernard has already taken over his head. He asks Eugene to come a little closer. No 9th rank cadet has ever managed anything like this. As is proper by the rules, he greets Bernard. He learned everything quickly. This is not a gift. The young man earned his sword. Now Bernard himself will engrave Eugene's name on his sword. But afterwards, he did as his high position commanded. It seemed like his mana had become 10 times stronger. The engraving site emitted such powerful energy that it was difficult to stand on one's feet. Even the cadets standing nearby felt it. It's a good thing Emma shielded Gabrielle, creating a small barrier. But in reality, even this might not have been enough. Only the heiress of the ruling family didn't care about anything. After a few minutes, the energy vortex died down. The ceremony can be considered complete because everything went according to plan. Now his name shone on the plaque next to the names of other heroes. This news will remain the main one among students for a long time. Eugene became an example for everyone and earned universal respect. However, Eugene himself was nowhere to be found. Emma wanted to throw him a congratulatory party, but he seemed to disappear. It would be better if they didn't know what he was doing now. In fact, the whole time the guy was engaged in evening meditation. Every day he gained better control over his mana. Even Henry was surprised at how well he did it. He was always too sentimental. It's time to get used to it. Although, if he cried more quietly, it wouldn't interfere with meditation. We need to achieve more than we have now. So, you need to wipe away your tears and continue meditating. How many times will he talk about this? If it worked twice, it will work a third time. He didn't yet know what today's meditation would lead to. However, everyone who was nearby found out about this. Henry hadn't felt this kind of energy in a long time. It seemed that even the appearance of his ward had changed beyond recognition. If he was not mistaken, he saw before him an intelligent giant. With this power, they will be able to level up Eugene faster. But it took a lot of effort for the guy himself. Before you can rejoice, you need to live through this experience. This energy was so strong that it was not easy for the guy. For someone else, this meditation might have been their last. A minute ago, Henry was happy about Eugene's success. But now something has changed. Rather, he needs help to calm this lightning energy. It fills his entire body, inside and out, and a second later, a completely new creature appears before them. But this shouldn't have happened. However, Eugene summoned him using a blessing, and here he is. But even if so, something like this cannot happen to a person. Or maybe it can? Eugene's body absorbed the mana like a cotton ball. Now we can only hope that the guy can handle it himself. Otherwise, he risks dying right here. To stop lightning, you need to stop the flow of mana. Why didn't he say so right away? And no one asked him about it. He could receive a blessing or die in this attempt. There's no need to talk about Eugene's death because the guy has already been through a lot. So he can handle this too. Otherwise, there was no point in accepting a force that his body could not withstand. In this he was right. But was it worth thinking about it when he was in danger? The boy knows he won't get a blessing if he stops now. That's why Eugene keeps trying. You need to take control of intelligent energy and keep it in your body. It sounded much easier in words than in practice. Henry couldn't just sit back and wait. He could try to protect his heart with his magic. Magic immediately enveloped his heart, giving it vitality. Incredibly, it worked. Henry himself did not know that he possessed such power. And yet he was a little hasty. If his heart explodes, they will both die. Looking at his hand, Henry realized that his end was near. He used too much divine energy and began to dissolve into thin air. Dissolve into thin air? In other words, he could die in just a few seconds. But he, like Eugene, did not want to die. However, this is exactly what happened to him. Their experiments went too far. The cost of the mistake was known to Henry in advance. If help doesn't arrive in time, the worst will happen. It is at this moment that he notices a young priest at the door. Jacob was already here and became their last hope. Out of the way. What the hell are they doing here? He realized that Eugene was still alive, but the mana energy had already done its job. It was difficult to tell whether he was conscious. If Eugene doesn't give up, then Henry shouldn't lose hope either. Surprisingly, Jacob could hear the voice of the spirit. However, what's surprising about that? He's a priest. Besides, Henry himself called him to help Eugene. All you have to do is block the lightning and then use healing magic. Henry's abilities will come in handy here too. He surrounded him with his magic while Jacob tried to stop the flow. Blocking lightning energy proved much more difficult. It's time. We need to act immediately. There may not be another chance. Don't give up. He must cope. Meanwhile, Norman was receiving a new guest. It turned out to be a girl who kept the most powerful mana within herself. He learned about this during a duel with a dark spirit. It was Sophia who immediately attracted his attention with her unusual mana. And if she's ready to truly learn magic, she should start right now. We must remember the day of the duel between Eugene and Rupert. She probably remembers the energy barrier that Norman created. Then he felt an incredibly strong mana in her body. This mana was incomprehensible to modern magic. He warns that the training will be very difficult. She should have thought about this before she came here. Now Eugene has almost finished studying his mana, but without the necessary skills, the girl will not be able to help him. Even if her help is insignificant, she is still ready. Beautiful words. First, she needs to get Eugene's permission, since she is still his servant. It is at this moment that the energy reaches the dean's office. What is this? Perhaps something happened to the young master. Luckily, they arrived just in time. Jacob and Henry were able to help the master in time. It's hard to say why Eugene's mana went out of control. Most likely, the young man took on too much. Today is a great chance for Sophia to start training. Norman agreed to personally mentor her as she began her journey. This means that another magician will appear in their house. Something wrong? But why didn't she talk about this before? In fact, Sophia herself did not know about her talent. It was Norman who noticed her unusual mana. He always knew how to spot talent before others. In that case, Eugene didn't object. This was great news for Sophia, who is now officially a cadet. They will be doing magic, right? Come to think of it, Eugene himself hadn't studied magic properly until now. At this point, he turned to Norman with an important question. As you know, a friendly meeting to exchange experiences will take place soon. To do this, Eugene will need a teacher to train in the fortress. I wonder what he's getting at. Doesn't he know that he must find his own teacher? The fortress was a training facility for members of the ruling family only. The eldest child of each family trains individually with the best. He hoped that Eugene had long ago found an elder who would support him. Hope dies last. Now it is clear that he does not even have his own elder. It's unpleasant to admit, but he doesn't have a single sponsor. Maybe I should write to an old friend. The next day, Clara received an urgent letter. Vincent was quick and delivered the letter quickly. Recently, he has become very efficient. If he personally brought the letter, it means there is something important in it. In that case, she will personally hand it over to Bernard. Soon the letter was already lying on his desk. As promised, Clara personally explained the essence of the letter. It was clear from the handwriting that the young man was in a great hurry. I wonder what's in this letter. The main thing is that Eugene asks to find him a teacher. She should have realized this earlier. In addition, he recently received the power of a giant with lightning energy and could not cope with the amount of mana. She must understand why Eugene sent this letter. It seems that for the first time, the son asks his father for help. Yes, he can only turn to Bernard. However, Clara had already taught Eugene fencing. It wasn't exactly a full-fledged workout, but it did give him something. If she teaches him too long, he will only develop bad habits. However, she had a suitable teacher in mind. This man was a master of the main family's sword art. Bernard's authority will help to persuade him. By the way, he himself must want this. If it is beneficial to both, then such an opportunity should be taken advantage of. The main candidate for the role of Eugene's teacher was former Captain Ernest. The guy himself doesn't know about it yet. He has been wandering for a long time where they last met. He suddenly remembered that training session with Eugene. That day, Ernest gave him a healing potion for the minor wounds he received during training. Eugene immediately struck him as a great guy, but today it's time to get to know him better. Clara came here precisely for this purpose because she had important business. It would be better to find a suitable place for such a conversation. At first, the guy was surprised by the offer of a new position. In addition, you will have to serve in an educational institution. Not very interesting. Unexpected reaction. And what will he say when he finds out that he is offered to become Eugene's teacher? Eugene's opportunity to become the head of the family is also beneficial to him. The guy thinks he can't handle it. Then he should know that Eugene recently received the blessing of the giant's lightning. To be honest, this is already more interesting. But he has too many reasons not to teach him. In that case, they should just make a bet. The young master will soon have a duel with Ethan. If Clara had started the conversation with the main thing, Ernest would not have needed much persuasion. Moreover, training such a talented fighter is a great honor. He is a real genius, but his skills are still not enough. The main task is to learn to connect the sword with the flow of mana. To achieve this, the flow power needs to be increased. And try not to get caught in your own magical flow. This problem is more difficult. He has absolutely no control over his own energy. Eugene feels lightning bolts fill his body. However, it has not been possible to take them under control. Maybe Henry was right, and there were some skills Eugene would never master. Was it really the first time in his life that he agreed with him? By the way, Henry has become too gloomy lately. He himself convinced Eugene to be strong and not give in to difficulties. Meanwhile, Clara was writing him a letter. Apparently, it won't be possible to find a teacher before a friendly meeting. Despite persuasion, Ernest refused. Besides, the elders don't want anyone to interfere with this. Even Bernard cannot go against the decision of the board. Clara cannot leave her duties as chief chamberlain for long. In other words, none of the candidates agreed. But there is another way. Now he will find out about everything. He had already demonstrated his skill with the sword in the fight with Rupert. Eugene recalls the aftermath of that fight. If he shows his swordsmanship in public, he will be taken back to his mother. Henry had to admit that it was a little humiliating. On the other hand, he might have retained a skill from his past life. Shouldn't he remember his old skills? But the main thing is that his future opponent didn't need it. His skills were always in abundance, even to go against a white blue-eyed tiger. The beast from Frost Mountain was brought here from the forest near the Crimson Fortress. At that moment, someone's voice was heard nearby. It turned out that the messenger already had news about Ethan's next opponent. Here he is, this man. He is a direct heir who has recently achieved significant success. If he loses the battle, his family will face humiliation and exclusion. People want to see the underdog rise up and win. People always enjoy such spectacles. The question is, what will he do? In response, Ethan always does something like this. He is ready to do anything to preserve the honor of the family and wipe the noses of various upstarts. Meanwhile, Emma hurries to Eugene with a little surprise in her hands. She can already imagine how happy he will be when he sees this. It will be interesting to see his face. Surprise. By the way, Emma's face at that moment was also very unusual. After all, Eugene had already gotten ahead of her with his surprise. He was already here. Little surprise, right? A huge sword, imbued with destructive mana, was it? Emma had never seen anything like it before. How do you like this? She was actually a little surprised. By the way, this is also worth taking a look at. The enchanted crystal looked ordinary, but there was something hidden inside it. This crystal contains a recording of a sparring match between the son of the ruling family. I wonder where she managed to get it. Everyone should have their own secrets. And indeed, this information will help Eugene in the upcoming fight. Right after that, he couldn't wait to watch Ethan spar. It's a pity they didn't have time to stock up on popcorn. However, for Eugene, this fight was not the most important one. Ethan reminded him terribly of his lifelong rival. Even their fighting techniques were very similar. Ethan attacked the legs, knowing his opponent's weak point in advance. But only Eugene knew it was a trick. After all, a second later he would force his opponent to defend himself with a sharp blow. And then, hiding a strong blow among several others, he finished the fight. Something like this. The enemy had no choice but to surrender. Ronald had used this technique against him many times before. Well done, you little bastard. Ethan never spared those defeated in duels. Looking at him, one immediately remembered Ronald's fighting style. Girls are better off not looking at this. However, Eugene always looked the truth in the eye. There was no difference between them except for a different hairstyle. Maybe he's not the only one who experienced reincarnation? Perhaps Ronald also ended up in another body and is now somewhere nearby. In the distant past, Eugene suffered humiliation and beatings from this scoundrel. However, in this life everything was completely different. Meanwhile, Albert was ready to begin today's meeting. He asked everyone to calm down, as it was a bit noisy in the hall. That's better. It means everyone is ready for the meeting. The friendly meeting for the exchange of experience is held in 3 stages. The first stage requires you to find a treasure chest in an enchanted dungeon. Immediately after this follows a battle with the captured monster. And of course the main event was sparring. First, they need to determine the type of monsters they will create with magic. Norman had a question about the stages of the competition. In the fortress, one of the students showed himself very well, which means that reptiles and demons will be just right. It will be quite difficult to fight such monsters in competitions. However, there was a person in the room with a better idea. Albert asks those who have a different opinion to speak out. Sebastian proposed a level 8 giant beast as an opponent. What did he just say? Doesn't he understand that the difficulty of giants is only suitable for 5-star martial artists? He simply suggested it, although it was worth making changes to stir up the crowd. Norman doesn't believe that Sebastian suggested this just to amuse the crowd. If he is looking for excuses, then he should immediately abandon this idea. It would be better if he didn't say such things to someone who could grind him into dust. Or maybe he wants to experience his new fireball of destruction on his own skin? It's good that at that moment, Albert stopped the 2 warring rivals. This discussion would be better resolved by a simple vote if they don't mind. Norman realizes that almost every participant in the room votes for the giants. They conspired, but the decision can no longer be changed. We need to prepare the giant illusory beast as the main opponent as soon as possible. When Helga learns this news, she regrets not being at that meeting. She would probably have picked out a few kind words for the participants. At that moment, Norman did everything he could, but the forces were unequal. We have to admit that after this, the girl will have more work. It was good that Norman was willing to help her with something. There were too many preparations for the first stage, and he could have been involved in illusions. Although I don't even want to remember it. All the mages at that meeting, including Albert himself, were from another fortress. That's probably why he gave his word to Sebastian, who suggested using monsters. The 6th magic tower is located on their territory and nothing can be done about it. She wouldn't be surprised if they turned out to be demons. Still, if Eugene can win the other stages, then everything will be great. It's strange that Helga still doubts the young man's strength. Maybe Norman is exaggerating a bit too? I wonder where Norman's usual passion for such things has gone. Or maybe he forgot what educational institution he came from. Perhaps at that moment he really did forget about it. And yet, instead of playing children's games, one should get down to work, because the meeting is tomorrow. With these words he leaves, slamming the door loudly behind him. To be honest, he could have done things a little differently. As Norman said, a friendly meeting took place. Today the hall was packed to capacity with photographers and journalists. Eugene was one of the main heroes of this meeting, and many were betting on him. It is clear that in the end he is destined to meet the successor of the ruling family. It felt like he was seeing déjà vu right now. Many years ago the gates opened the same way as they do now. But today he had to meet another person. Ethan was the spitting image of Ronald and acted in much the same way. Even his smile was a bit reminiscent of that guy's grin. Yet he was much more welcoming and immediately extended his hand. Eugene decided to answer him in kind, extending his hand in response. Not a bad start to the meeting. Photographers immediately captured this moment, which will make the front pages of newspapers. It's always nice to make friends with someone your own age. Nobody argued, and yet his aura was unpleasant. At first glance, there was nothing special, but it was too clearly reminiscent of Ronald's aura. Ethan acted as if they were old friends. However, these two knew very well who they were dealing with. Luckily for them, Eugene guessed it too. On the outside, he seemed to be smiling, but in reality, he was just waiting for this fight to start. Norman immediately notices that this cadet's communication was a little fake. It is also impossible to hide something like this from Helga. However, this will definitely not make it onto the covers of magazines and the front pages of newspapers. They behaved this way only to further increase their ratings. But the main thing that was required of them was victory in the upcoming fight. The audience is already waiting for it all to begin. They were happy to be among the lucky ones in those stands. From this moment on, it was possible to proclaim the beginning of a friendly meeting to exchange experiences. If both finalists of this meeting are ready, then Helga is ready too. At the first stage of the competition, the main task is to hunt for treasure. Both participants must enter the enchanted space and bring back a chest like this. However, inside the enchanted space, they will encounter an illusory monster. It is becoming clear that the difficulty of the task has been increased this year. Well, now it will be even more interesting to follow the fight. Eugene lost the last match, so he chooses the task first. Just in case, Helga told him which participants to choose first. In fact, he knew it very well himself. But instead, the guy chooses 2 cadets for the stage. Can't be. She asked him to make a different choice. So why didn't he listen to her? Moreover, the list of participants did not include the names he mentioned. However, they were there after all. True, these 2 cadets had the lowest scores among all the students. Instead of choosing the strongest, for some reason he took the weaklings. Helga asked him again if he was sure of his choice. She hoped he wasn't going to use these students as an excuse if he lost. However, no one has spoken about losing yet. In fact, he didn't even think about making excuses in case of defeat by his young opponent. Besides, these 2 were distant relatives of Ethan. The last time he spoke to Emma, she told him about it. Although she thought that at the competition, he would choose her. Yes, thanks to her leadership skills, he was able to defeat Rupert. Therefore, at this friendly meeting, he expected a good performance from her. Can you be a little more specific? The plan was a small provocation involving Ethan's relatives. In such a situation, Ethan would not dare to act against the 2 of them. Ethan quickly realized the plan and, in turn, abandoned the previous representative. Well, that was a great move. In fact, it was quite predictable. Norman knew where this was going, but he could only trust this young man. Sebastian was very surprised that Ethan refused the representative. And yet, just recently, he was so impatiently awaiting the start of the first stage. That's right, that's how it was. But after Eugene's clever move, everything changed a little. From this moment on, the first stage of the friendly meeting is declared open. Helga welcomes everyone gathered for this event. And yet Emma hoped to find herself in the center of the arena. Once everyone is ready, the first stage of the treasure hunt can begin. The interdimensional portal quickly transports them to the desired location. Gabriel immediately suggests using the glowing crystal. Not a bad suggestion, although it won't help against the monster. Meanwhile, Ethan also continues on his way. Unlike the first group, these 3 are walking in complete darkness. Emma offers him the crystal, saying that otherwise they will miss the monster's attack. Instead of answering, he asks them to move away. So we talked. Well, their team turned out to be so-so. They had completely different approaches, and Ethan was used to working alone. Eugene, on the other hand, knew the benefits of teamwork. Next to him were two excellent masters who managed to overcome their fears. But something terrible did happen at the first stage. The explosion scatters the entire group in all directions. It's good that the fall was cushioned by soft bags. It seems like a trap. Now it's clear who it was. At the end of the gorge, a giant monster was waiting for them. If they had known about it in advance, they would not have agreed to participate. It's too late to look for a way out in such a situation. All you can do is grab your head. It's difficult to do, especially when the leader is pinned down by a boulder. However, everything was fine with him. The energy that Eugene had accumulated was now put to good use. You can't kill a monster with one blow, but you can seriously injure it. After the first attack, Eugene manages to knock the monster off its feet. It's time. You need to follow the plan and look for the treasure chest. To distract the monster, both cadets begin to beat the drum. So they give Eugene a chance to continue the competition. It would be better to drive the big guy back to where they entered the gorge. Eugene had no doubt of their courage. Now it's time to go to the chest. It's a pity Helga didn't tell him something beforehand. The main thing at this stage is to show your skills in battle with the monster. If he runs away, he will be immediately excluded from the competition. The strategy was excellent, but for some reason the details were not explained to him. Meanwhile, Eugene is already close to his goal. The chest was nearby, which meant the goal was close. But, as we know, there is a difference between a goal that is close and one that has been achieved. Having pulled himself together, the mutant sends him to the side with a heavy blow. It will take time to recover. Bloody bastard. There was another giant next to the chest, and that was bad news. As soon as he appeared, he immediately attacked. Luckily, Eugene was lucky this time. His plan requires at least one absolute cut. It would be desirable for the cut to go straight down the neck of this freak. The monster was much faster than all its predecessors. Despite its size, it managed to react to the speed of the icy walk. A little more and the competition would have been over for Eugene. Norman knew that things were not going according to plan. This was beneficial to his rivals. It looks like someone made a serious mistake. Surely this clown was somehow involved in the appearance of the second monster. However, it was worth keeping a hold of yourself. If they make a fuss, they risk losing. It's understandable why he's angry. But it won't change anything now. Unlike the others, Helga was calm. That's right, but he will get to know her better after the competition. Emma has already managed to meet one of the strongest monsters. However, she did not see him alive for long. Someone arrived in time and cut off his hand with one movement of a blade. Ethan was just looking for the right moment to attack. The next blow hit him right on the head. Many thought that after this, everything would end for the monster. After a direct hit, it will be difficult to get back on your feet even once in your life. For Ethan, this was not a difficult task to do, given his experience. However, the mutant was ready to continue the fight. Is he immortal? Swordsmanship wasn't the guy's greatest asset. This spectacular strike was just the beginning of the main show. It would be much more interesting to carry out a series of such attacks at once. He understands that this time everything will be much more interesting. After one deft jump, he found himself right on the giant hand of this monster. One more jump, and now the big guy will no longer be able to look down on him. After such a jump, he himself ends up right under the ceiling. From here, it is much more convenient to deliver fatal blows using your destructive power. Does anyone else think there was a different leader in this competition? Emma saw Ethan wield his deadly mana for the first time. She knew this guy was strong before, but now she saw his abilities with her own eyes. It's understandable why he was so proud. At the same time, his main rival had something to occupy himself with. Eugene realizes that he needs to make some slight changes to the original plan. True, Henry realized this long ago. And it is strange that the young master thinks for so long. They can't just herd them into one place and kill them all at once. Only in words it may seem like an easy task. In fact, the mutants were too big. In battle, each of them was incredibly strong, and especially in moments of rage. If only he had a proper target, it would be a little easier. Wait a minute, a target? What if we try another way? By the way, two of his partners have already tried it, so they found themselves opposite the giant. To be honest, this method is not very good. This method is suitable for those who are bored with life. For everyone else, something else will do. Luckily, at that moment their leader was next to them. Plans changed dramatically because he was already close. It would be nice to explain everything in more detail. But there was no time for long explanations, because monsters appeared at the end of the tunnel. Two three-eyed giants were looking straight at them. The three of them needed to hurry up with their plan, if they even had one. And if there was no plan, one could only sympathize with them. It was useless to call for help, because only cadets and young heirs took part in the competition. Eugene was ready to launch an attack, and hoped that Henry would help with this. By that time, Henry was already behind the mutants. He didn't want to become a target, but he had no other choice now. A little more, and he would have grabbed Eugene like a small bug. Due to his size, the guy was unable to choose a position for an absolute cut. It's good that at least I managed to dodge. At that moment, he seemed to feel the other half of his soul. Her presence was felt by every cell of his body. Perhaps it was the influence of Henry's magic. However, the soulless giant did not want to waste time on sentimentality. However, his rival also wanted to put an end to this. The absolute cut in its special form was his next move. Such power could only belong to the chosen one. Eugene chose one of the giants as his target. It was a very difficult day for Henry. However, things were no easier for the monsters. The difference was that all the monsters in the competition were illusory. However, such a spectacular blow was quite real. Great job. Now no one will say that Eugene was just lucky. Yes, such luck simply does not exist. The same cannot be said about Henry, who was indeed lucky. It was necessary to warn in advance about the use of an absolute cut, but it worked. His partners were probably a little surprised today. They expected something a little different. But Eugene was used to surprising his friends. To be honest, there was simply no other way to win. It was for just such a case that he saved the ability of absolute cutting. There was one last thing left that he had to defeat with this skill. It was necessary to destroy the source that created the illusory space. It is much easier to destroy the same magic with a magic sword, but this was not specified in the terms of the assignment. But that was how he was able to find himself back in the center of the stadium, dispelling the magic of the illusion. The magic dungeon was destroyed by a 9th rank boy. A simple cadet managed to do what only a few could do. Sebastian ordered his men to double-check the spell. However, one could calm down, because Eugene really did stop its effect. Pretty cool, right? It was not in vain that he trusted this guy, because he saw talent in him. Now many will be able to take a closer look at this talent. At the very beginning it seemed to Albert that such an outcome was simply impossible. For destroying the arena, the young master should be disqualified. Helga reminds that there is no rule against this. However, he looks a little upset, even too much, as if he wanted Eugene to fail. By the way, Gabriel had a small gift for Helga. This chest was intended for a completely different person. He didn't care who won the first stage. After all, the competition is not over yet. The main thing is that they do not end in death for his ward. The monster was just an illusion, but its blows shattered the stones into pieces. Now Ethan is left alone, which means he will have to fight alone. At that moment, Eugene suddenly said that Ethan would soon leave the dungeon. In other words, it will happen sooner than he wants. How should this be understood? He will soon find out everything himself, but for now there is something that needs to be done. The connecting element was hidden, so Eugene entered the same dungeon as Ethan. But he destroyed his dungeon a minute ago, right? Then the mana from the destroyed dungeon will rush into one of the remaining ones. This can be easily explained using the example of 2 streams of water from one source. If you divide water into 2 streams and block one, something quite expected will happen. Quite expected for everyone except this guy. All the water will flow into one stream in a second, just like what happens with the dungeon's mana. That's right. Ethan will soon receive a fiery greeting from Eugene. However, the battle with the giant Cyclops was still ongoing. The mutant was preparing to strike again, which could be the last one. Even though the monster had become weaker, its intelligence should have remained at the same level. From simple blows he only loses strength. Although for another student this might have been enough, if only because of its enormous size. Impossible! He became so strong that he was able to break through his defense. Is this the end? It's hard to believe, but the blow actually happened. Ethan had never missed a blow from an illusionary monster before. Something must have happened outside the dungeon. Otherwise, it is impossible to explain how the dying monster was able to continue the fight. Yes, everything didn't go according to plan. It's a shame he didn't even have time to adapt to the form. But in the distance, the sound of drums could be heard. What the hell? He completely forgot that there were still 2 students left in the dungeon. Emma continued to distract the monster, giving Ethan an opportunity. She actually risked herself to save this guy. If Eugene hadn't asked her about it, everything might have been different. But right now, the girl herself was in danger. Despite its gigantic size, the monster was quite fast. He knocked her down with one blow. Things have gone too far. The mutant was already out of control and was destroying everyone around him. But the most important thing was hidden behind. Now she has to face 2 monsters at once. Oh no. It's good that Ethan decided to reciprocate Emma's kindness. Deep down, he was always a good guy. But he was only good for girls. Giant mutants don't count. He was merciless to these overgrown children, especially in those moments when they threatened his life. And yet he was there at the most necessary moment, when the girl's life could have ended. Nice guy, isn't he? Only now did he understand what the plan was. Somewhere outside was Eugene, who told Emma to keep an eye on him. He will never forgive them for this. However, it was only now that Emma realized something about him. There was simply no other way to win the competition. There is no need to be offended by your opponents, because Eugene played by the rules. In this way, he managed to complete the task before everyone else. He filled the dungeon with mana, which fed those monsters. The giants have gotten out of control and have become much stronger. That was the plan. It was actually quite funny. He looks forward to answering them. This opportunity will appear very soon. These two clearly knew something that Helga didn't. True, the cunning Henry had long suspected everything. Soon, Emma stayed with Ethan to talk. She admits that she was quite scared in the last battle. Ethan's unexpected reaction changes everything. Ethan states that he is not at all offended by her. On the contrary, she taught him a lot, and he can't wait to shake her hand. Then he actually extends his hand to her, as a sign of his friendship. It felt like his palm was saturated with a dark aura. Ethan hopes that Emma doesn't realize he's been deceiving her. If so, it's worth simply ending the day with a friendly handshake. Finally, he wishes her a good day and hopes to see her soon. And yet the girl felt that something was wrong with him. Emma's feelings did not deceive her. Meanwhile, Sophia's training continued every night. She has already learned a lot in the study of magic. Norman became a great mentor, teaching her how to control mana. And it seems that someone is planning to stop her. But it was Vincent she was waiting for here. He brought food and clothes and was glad he got there on time. By the way, at a friendly meeting to exchange experiences, his master won. Sophia had no doubt about it. For a long time, she couldn't concentrate, because all her thoughts were swirling around the competition. She realized that being a spirit mage was more suited to her. The souls of these animals are so cute. Suddenly, she heard someone's voice in the distance. It was as if someone was calling for help from the depths of the forest. Strangely enough, there was no one around except the souls summoned by Sophia. It turns out that they were being watched from afar all this time. The next day, everyone could get together and celebrate the victory. Emma suggested raising their mugs to their leader's victory. Eugene fought with dignity and defeated Ethan himself. Oddly enough, the winner of the competition behaved too modestly. In that case, he needed a good drink. Well, that's his business. Eugene believed that Emma played an important role in his victory. It was only thanks to her that his main rival's chances of winning were greatly reduced. Yes, it was Emma's actions that allowed Eugene to win. It turns out they have recently become great allies. It's hard to argue. One can only hope that this victory was not the last. No, it can't be. There was clearly something wrong with her hand. Emma didn't know anything yet. It seemed as if his worst suspicions had been confirmed. It's hard to believe, but Ethan's family's binding seal was right on her hand. But when did she manage to meet Ethan, and how did he put the seal? All in all, it was quite a long story. It turned out that he shook Emma's hand to thank her for her help. Knowing his character, it is difficult to believe that he is capable of gratitude at all. The binding seal will gradually drain all of Emma's mana, causing her to die a slow and painful death. Otherwise, everything was great. She shouldn't have done this, because Eugene warned her about this guy. But he approached her himself, and she simply couldn't refuse. In that case, they will have to do some dawn training. Indeed, their first joint training began with the first rays of the sun. However, only Eugene and his little assistant came to the forest for training. Only Emma didn't come, although she promised to be at the first training session. In any case, Ethan's curse had to be kept secret. If anyone finds out about this, Emma's life will change forever. Suddenly, Emma herself was next to them. True, this time she looked completely different, like an experienced magician. She overdid it a bit and spent the whole night preparing for the training. Since when did she change her image? And by the way, why did she dress so strangely for training? She probably wanted to impress the young master more than to train. Otherwise, she wouldn't dress like she was going on a date. Was it possible that all this time she had liked Eugene for more than just his martial arts skills? Perhaps she saw him as someone else who he really is not. However, it didn't matter anymore. Now it was time to focus on what they were here for. Eugene told her to continue circulating the mana, and to tell her if she felt anything strange. But it is unlikely that anything bad could happen from simple circulation. She had long been able to do much more than he thought. Henry watched carefully as the circulation of mana changed after the curse was cast. She was strong, but she still couldn't resist the seal. In the end, Eugene was never able to remove it himself. In that case, there was one last option left. The binding seal required an offering, which was the heart of a living being. It sounds wild, but this was the only way to remove the connecting chain. If they fail, the worst thing will happen to her. In exactly 3 days she will die, and nothing will be able to stop it. At least Eugene has 3 more days to spare. It sounds heartless, but for Henry, sharing experiences was much more important. However, those who pursue only their own goals lose their people. If his comrades had not sided with him, he would never have survived that suffering. By that time, the girl was already noticeably tired. If so, then we can finish training for today and go home. When he was in prison, his mana was sealed tightly. It's hard to imagine how terrible his life was during those years. While they were talking, the girl felt sick, as if everything in her head was mixed up. Such thoughts make it difficult to even stand on your feet. Is she really that tired? Eugene realizes that the curse is working much faster than they expected. If they don't want to lose her, they need to come back as soon as possible. Soon the girl was already in the infirmary. It's good that they arrived in time and now her life is safe. However, the curse did not go away because the seal remained on the hand. And it was this damned seal that caused the fainting. If there is no other way, Eugene is ready to go even to this. Is he planning to jump out the window? Doesn't he realize that this is dangerous? He's crazy. Yet Eugene takes this step, hoping that this time he will be lucky. He's not ready to lose his man to Ethan's dirty tricks. And if I have to surpass myself, then so be it. Meanwhile, Sophia had already learned a lot. She felt the presence of spirits even when they were not around. But this time, there was something else here. Or rather, someone else. Who the hell is this? In fact, he didn't expect to meet his maid here. The offering needed to be something small and easy to hide. However, nothing came to Sophia's mind yet. Perhaps she knows a way to help Eugene with this. Fortunately, there was one such method. To make it in time, they needed to hurry and do it today. Just for this purpose, Eugene could instantly transport both of them to another part of the forest. Taking her in his arms, he immediately heads where Sophia pointed him. Soon she notices a place below where she should stop. There might have been something like a small spirit between the walls of the canyon. Eugene instantly travels to the very bottom of the canyon, but only Sophia can find the spirit here. She tries her best to find what even Eugene couldn't find. Just in case, he could bare his blade at any moment if a guest appeared from the darkness. However, now even this was unnecessary because Sophia discovered something nearby. Using the magic that Norman taught her, she began to activate mana. A few seconds later, the small creature was in her hands. This soul had the same binding seal on it as she did. Since the creature became an offering for the binding seal, he didn't have a chance. Perhaps it will help the unfortunate girl and fulfill its main earthly purpose. It was difficult for her to take this step, but there was no other choice. However, what happened the next second made everyone nervous. It's hard to believe, but she actually makes a contract with a spirit. If Sophia does this, the spirit will become more important than the binding seal. All that remains is to cut the chain that holds the spirit. Great, it worked. The curse was lifted, which means the same thing can be repeated with Emma. He's very cute, isn't he? And yet, Eugene's guesses were correct. Suddenly, he felt someone's presence behind him. This feeling did not fail him again. At any moment, the guy could do what he was best at. Now there was no doubt that another duel awaited them in this canyon. Whoever it is, he should show himself and meet them face to face. There was no answer for some time. But just a moment later, someone's footsteps were heard in the distance. It turns out that Ethan could not come to terms with his defeat and wanted to take revenge. It was too humiliating, and now Eugene will have to defeat him again. Oh no, not this time. With his victory, Eugene crossed out everything that Ethan had been prepared for since childhood. In other words, he caused a huge conflict, for which he must pay with his life. You need to put this soul back and get out of here. No, he couldn't allow that. And then he realizes that Eugene didn't know something all this time. But what exactly? The thing is that every mage is born with a certain class. Even Eugene has this class, although he doesn't know it. People like these two were born to bear heavy burdens. However, there are those who are freed from this burden. Those who dare to cross this line are not like other wizards. When danger was near, Ethan sensed it. The girl was in league with Eugene and dared to ruin his plan. Kill her. She must receive her deserved punishment. And along with her, her comrades. Looking at him, Eugene understands that people have not changed at all. In the 500 years that have passed since his first life, they have remained the same. In fact, they were no better 500 years ago. However, now it is necessary to stop the one who can interfere with his main plan. First, he should take a closer look at himself. He seems to be a little distracted. Ethan was quick and could now complete the move. In this case, someone's head won't be cut off. Will he really do it? Well, why not? At the same time, the seal on Emma's hand gradually disappeared. Then the girl herself woke up. Jumping up abruptly in bed, she tried to remember what had happened to her. Eugene was also already here and wanted to immediately look at the connecting seal. There was no problem with this, because Emma had nothing to hide from him. However, until he is convinced himself, he is unlikely to leave here. And indeed, the binding seal on her hand had completely disappeared. This means that all his efforts were not in vain. However, there are only 2 days left until the second stage of the competition. Eugene believes that these days will be enough for full preparation. Of course, unless Emma shakes Ethan's hand again. Meanwhile, in the house of the leading family, all the heads gathered at one table. Frank was unhappy that he was being distracted from important matters. Josephine had already gotten used to the fact that he was always complaining and doing nothing. At first, she thought the boy was incapable of anything, but now everything has changed. The only thing that didn't change was Hector's attitude towards the little bastard. Now is not the time to stand aside, it is time to act. Where did this old man decide to start? For 5 centuries, the elders have always been the main organ of power. However, after Bernard took up this position, the usual way of life changed forever. He made no secret of his dislike for the other elders and sowed discord. This is why Josephine decided to sponsor her first son and second daughter as possible heirs. An ambitious first son could be a great ally. The second daughter has no interest at all except martial arts, and yet this is not enough. We had to think about what would happen after Eugene won the competition. This young woman's son may take complete control. It is known that Bernard personally engraved his name on the plaque next to the main characters. Seriously? Damn! Don't they know anything about this? Bernard uses this boy to point his sword at the rest of the elders. They never expected this. It seemed that only Hector was interested in this. If so, it would be worth speaking more specifically if he has a plan of action. But whatever he proposed, he did not have the final say. Only Richard could make such decisions, and he wants to send a secret letter. He believes that he needs to meet Eugene halfway and deliver a decisive blow in the back. Hector always respected his decision, but this time it was too strange. Richard saved the most important thing for last. The second stage of the competition should be held under the guidance of their family, and this is a great chance for them. 2 days later, the stadium was filled to capacity. Of course, the second stage of the competition was supposed to be a grand show. There was only one rule in the punitive duel. You need to crush as many mutants as possible in the shortest possible time. This is a simple rule, nothing special. If you don't take into account that the monsters themselves could destroy any participant, the lizard's powerful attack became the first threat to one of them. The desire to survive required him to be more attentive. It felt like he vanished into thin air. However, he was still here. This battle could be the fastest in the history of the competition. After his last defeat, Ethan was determined to take back what was his. With one blow, he cut the monster in half, causing the stands to roar. No one has ever managed to do this in such a short time. Norman realizes that at this rate, he can win. This is exactly what Ethan wanted. Still, it's worth finding out what the main contender is capable of, although Ethan still considered himself the main one. But some were betting on Eugene. Well, it's time for him to prove that he is the best. He had already proven himself to be an excellent fighter, and it was necessary to do it again. Soon the boy found himself in front of a cage where a monster was already waiting for him. And here he is. Then there's no point in wasting time and we can open the damn cage. Great mood. There were only a few seconds left before the cage opened. It's open. Only Richard knew how it would end. He drinks his tea calmly, confident that his plan will work. He also understands Josephine and hopes that this plan will work perfectly. In fact, he didn't do anything special with the monster in the arena. He didn't even use any special magic to strengthen the monster. However, he did not feed him for the last 2 days in order to prepare him a special dessert. The dessert was supposed to be the dead body of the damn boy. Now it's clear why the lizard was so angry. Maybe they have some sandwiches for the monster? Otherwise, you'll have to fight a hungry mutant, who right now just wanted to devour everyone here. However, Eugene had another snack for this bastard. For example, a piece of cold metal in his mouth. If he was that hungry, there was nothing stopping him from simply attacking his defenseless victim. But why did he spread his arms out to the sides? Norman understands that such self-confidence could end badly. However, the hungry mutant doesn't see any catch here. However, not a single viewer notices the catch, because a second later the monster pierces the guy right through. This doesn't sound like a well-thought-out plan at all. I had to believe that this was not a dream. It was a brutal reality unfolding before everyone's eyes. But at that very moment, Eugene plunges his blade into the monster's body. He managed to speed up the fight, but the price was too high. Having pierced each other through and through, both opponents froze for a moment. Unlike the mutant, a slight smile appears on Eugene's face. But what appeared on the creature's face could hardly be called a smile. The lightning giant's blessing was the secret he saved for last. The flow impulse completed what it started. After this impulse, the monster didn't have a single chance. Norman didn't immediately understand what had happened in the center of the arena. But Helga understands this much earlier. He told her before the competition that it would be held under different rules. Looking back at what happened, she realizes he was right. Yet the price of victory was high. For her sake, the guy had to endure incredible pain, being pierced through and through. Less than 6 seconds had passed since the monster left the cage, meaning Eugene had won. The priest realized that the young master was seriously injured. First, you need to pull out the spear and heal the wound at the same time. To be honest, it was very painful. It was so painful that Ethan probably wouldn't be able to survive it, but Eugene still went for it. So which one is stronger? Damn this upstart! It was clear without further ado where the audience's sympathies lay. The award should go to the one who put on a great show for them. The victory was so spectacular that word of it quickly spread throughout the area. Even Vanessa found out about what happened in the second stage. She was on her way to meet a new hero. However, the hero still needed a little time. Until he had fully recovered, he had to remain in the hospital under the supervision of priests. Although he stated that everything was perfectly fine with his shoulder. Suddenly the priest confesses something. He says that the owner of this wooden token was another person. In other words, he cannot treat him as well as the head priest. Eugene healed so quickly it seemed like a miracle. The priest did all he could, using the same methods he had used to treat Rupert. It turns out that his heart is not yet fully healed and he is not ready for training. At this moment, the competition judge enters the infirmary. She wants him to go to a dinner party with her. The newly arrived heads of families invited Eugene to this event. Such an offer is not refused, and he decides to accept the invitation. And yet the priest's words do not leave my head. Suddenly he notices in front of him the very leader who invited him here. Josephine joyfully greets the famous young man. A whole year had passed since their last meeting, and during that time he had changed a lot. The dinner party soon began. However, in the first minutes, none of them said a word. Josephine decided to speak first, reminding them of the special treat. Yes, the treat was very tasty, simply wonderful. Bon appétit, everyone. Maybe one of them will suggest a topic for conversation? For example, we can talk about where Bernard has been hiding this talent all this time. To be honest, it's not very pleasant to have a conversation when someone is pointing a kitchen knife at you. But he soon realized that there was something more terrible than a knife. He instantly jumps up from his chair, ready to accept the challenge. At first, her aura seemed too strange, but now everything fell into place. Although Josephine thought that the chair should be put back first. Yet her aura contained too much dark energy, so much so that it would be enough to kill whoever it was aimed at. Although she seemed like a friendly girl on the outside. Having calmed down a little, he admits that he got a little carried away. Eugene always acknowledges the strength of someone who should truly be respected as an excellent magician. He has a good sense of other people's auras and understands Josephine's strength. However, Bernard could not say the same about her son. We are talking about Ethan, who did not inherit this aura. Besides, he behaved badly at the first stage. Ethan admits that it was part of the plan. Well, in that case, sometimes you have to change the plan. The situation became tense, and Josephine asked her son to control his emotions. For a moment, everyone in the room had to hold back their emotions. This is especially true for two heads who have been holding back for a long time. This is how the evening turned out. There was no reason to expect anything else, and it's good that the worst didn't happen. Bernard behaved funny during dinner, but it's time to talk about something serious. Someone is up to no good and Bernard knows it. Bernard was of the same opinion, since they thought alike. The elders want to remove the current leader, which means Bernard will need loyal allies. Unlike him, among those elders there were 4 strongest warriors. Everyone will be against Eugene, seeing him as a future competitor in the fight for the post. In such a situation, this young man may face trouble at the 3rd stage of the competition. Well, there was only one thing he could say now. If someone was planning something mean against his son, it would be the last thing the bastard would do in his life. To be honest, she meant something a little different. The point is that Bernard should have had another way to stop the elders. Until recently, it was believed that no one would dare to betray him. Even in the 3rd stage of the competition, nothing will prevent his son from winning. Words of a true leader. But hasn't something similar happened in his past? If you remember, a long time ago the boy had already promised that he would return home victorious. Be that as it may, this time the victory will be his, and there are all the reasons for it. A few days later, viewers would find out whether Bernard's words were true. Josephine couldn't wait for the 3rd stage of the competition to begin. Bernard wanted the same thing, hoping to see Eugene triumph. The blades of the main favorites crossed over their heads. They exchanged friendly greetings for the last time. But after the start, everything will change. There is no need to delay this moment. Each participant wanted to get everything out of this competition. The spectators in the stands wanted the same thing and were ready to see a real show. Henry warns Eugene that he must be mindful of his status. Besides, a wounded heart can only withstand a double-edged sword. In other words, you need to exploit your opponent's weak point and defeat him with one quick blow. If necessary, you can provoke him to use skills in order to learn them. Once he succeeds, it will become much easier to choose the appropriate ability. So this is the lightning giant's ability that Eugene used. In response to this, he has something better. He thought his main competitor would be a little more interesting. Instead, he sees only a frightened boy. It's a shame that Eugene turned out to be such a weakling in reality. But he is no longer ready to let him get away with what happened in the first 2 stages. After this, he reveals his black mana, which Eugene only now found out about. Yes, it was a stab in the back. The opponent has really prepared and secured serious support. If you use special techniques against him, you need to do it quickly. Otherwise, instead of victory, the worst thing awaits him. Need to block the blow. He thrusts forward the Crimson Lotus Sword, but it was too late. Backlog. Everything Josephine warned about was coming true before our eyes. The elders worked hard on him. Shrouded in a dark aura, Ethan didn't look like himself. However, his attacks did not end there. He rushes at his opponent again, wanting to finish him off. Where does so much hatred come from? He looked at him as if he were a sworn enemy who needed a one-way ticket. Not so fast. He is not the only one here who has control over a powerful aura. 2 monstrously powerful energies clashed at one point. A powerful explosion is heard in the center of the arena. Everything went a little differently than planned. Josephine knew what this young man was capable of. For some time, it was difficult to see anything. It was Eugene's energy that first emerged from this darkness. He manages to pull off a pretty good trick. What about his opponent? Ethan was also completely fine and ready to continue. Only now his attacks will be even more powerful. This psychopath was going to use all his destructive energy. He was ready to go to the end, stopping at nothing. The second explosion was even stronger than the first. A deep depression instantly formed in the center of the arena. This time it all has to end. He will win. Victory was closer than ever. All that was left was to wait. Oh damn. The Crimson Sword proved to be much more powerful than his aura. Instead of his defeated opponent, he saw the same boy in front of him again. But this time he managed to use the blade's full potential. He could easily break the life of anyone who dared to raise a weapon against him in half. By the way, it broke quite easily. Ronald has already cleared out of his path more than once those who dared to engage in battle with him. Oh yeah, this will be a lesson to all the other assholes. He was no different from Ronald, who grew up as the most cruel member of his family. At that time, Eugene could only watch from the sidelines. One day he watched the cruelty with which this bastard acts. At that moment, Thomas appeared nearby, hearing the loud cries of the unfortunate man. It's unlikely he wanted to watch this spectacle. But Thomas had seen something like this many times before and was not at all surprised. These two were born as puppets, used only to hone others' abilities. It's handy to have on hand those who can't hit back. But one day will come when Eugene will defeat his longtime rival. His existence was a continuous mockery of others, and he must be punished. I want to believe it. Suddenly he hears Thomas's confession. The guy thinks that only Eugene tried to resist. Everyone else had long since resigned themselves to it, and even Thomas was among them. He turned out to be right, because soon Eugene became the strongest warrior. He fell into a trap set by the elders and died that night. But it was Thomas who left his fencing skills to his friend. Now it was time to show what Eugene had learned in this life and in his past life. Justice will prevail today. The art of swordsmanship for which its creator died is not yet forgotten. In this case, it is worth moving from words to deeds. And Ethan had plenty of ways to do this. It must be admitted, this guy was really very strong. But the sword in Eugene's hand served him as an excellent shield. The opponent delivers a straight punch with all his might. However, the aura of this sword reliably covers Eugene. He is confident that he can easily break such a weak skill. Still, you shouldn't be so sure. The excessive pressure of his mana reminded him of how Ronald fought in his past life. Yes, he is well acquainted with this technique. With the next movement of his sword, he is going to finish off this boy. But instead, it instantly dissolves into thin air. What was that? The young master from the main family appeared out of nowhere and disappeared into nowhere. It's funny. However, Eugene knows that he was somewhere nearby all this time. The ability to disappear only worked if the enemy did not sense the aura. But Eugene could sense where Ethan was at any moment. Mana control came in handy. With the next blow, he was close to winning. But his opponent still managed to dodge it with a deft jump. He just wants to finish him off once and for all. To do this, you will have to forget about your arrogance and understand the obvious things. The truth is that Eugene was no longer a whipping boy, and could hit back with a devastating blow of his own. Well, do you like it? It seems not very much. Looking at him, he seems to see another person in front of him. Only the look of this boy will not allow anyone to look down on him. You can swing your sword as much as you want and waste energy, but it won't help. In the past, Ronald was a true genius and could control any situation with the help of mana. But this guy, on the contrary, was able to adopt only Ronald's shortcomings. Maybe today he will finally understand it. If not, Eugene will easily prove it during today's fight. Just one precise blow, and Ethan's sword shatters like fragile crystal. He no longer needs the destructive power, nor does he need the useless piece of debris in his hand. You'll have to believe it. How many times do you have to lose to understand the obvious? If the fight had taken place elsewhere, this guy would have cut more than just the blade in half. Never before have viewers seen a show that could end with someone's death. It is clear that their fight has long gone beyond the scope of competition. But Eugene wasn't the only one with aces up his sleeve. He notices how the sword in his opponent's hand takes on its normal appearance. Ethan's appearance changes, as if he can transform himself. In fact, the dark aura gave him some advantages. It's hard to believe, but he actually received a rare feature. Vanessa never thought it was possible. The blessing of the god of swords grants incredible swordsmanship talent. And now Ethan had this talent. It was this gift that changed his sword. He's at his peak level of 4 stars now, and that's dangerous. Eugene had already spent most of his strength on the Crimson Emperor's power. Using any more force is too dangerous. Well, it's nice when your opponent worries about you, but it's unnecessary. Eugene's strength was still at a high level. The tricks of this bastard were truly impressive, but it was too early to draw conclusions. As their blades crossed, monstrous energy gushed out in all directions. It is clear that everything is at stake today, and there will be only one winner. the one who will show the maximum of his abilities. It was clear that Ethan had no intention of giving in to his opponent. However, Eugene already knew its main advantages, which would soon become disadvantages. So far, Ethan has been acting too boldly and asking for an attack. Eugene must be more careful than ever. He must be prepared to put his own life on the line. Otherwise, he will not be able to defeat such a serious opponent, almost equal in strength. Although many considered Ethan to be the main favorite in this competition, today they had to change their minds and find another idol. At some point, Ethan was able to strike when Eugene's sword mana weakened. A second later, Eugene's main advantage crumbled before his eyes. Broke. But besides fencing, there is also fistfighting. It's good that he trained not only fencing. By the way, the direct punch to the head turned out to be very successful. Ethan was thrown so far that they found themselves on opposite sides of the arena. They both have already reached their physical limits. You have to put everything into the final blow. The final blow was an absolute slash with the power of a lightning giant. This blow could break through any barrier and hit an opponent at any distance. A moment later, it was difficult to see anything in the smoke. Eugene took advantage of this, ending up right above Ethan's head. He should have looked more carefully if his life was valuable. They have already become blood enemies, which meant there was nothing to lose. Besides their own lives, it seems like today these two will finally resolve their long-standing conflict. On this day, the stands witnessed a real miracle. A simple 9th-rank cadet defeated the heir to the ruling family. It's no wonder Bernard engraved this guy on the Wall of Honor. He deserved this ovation and the audience's love, because today he became the best. Just like it happened 500 years ago. Great job. This victory did not come easy for Eugene, and the guy can be understood. He still has some healing to do, as he took a lot of damage in the fight. Some people were not happy with his victory. It seemed that Hector, unlike the other cadets, was not happy about this boy's triumph. The same goes for Richard, although he was more reserved. Well, Clara has something to confess. The young master has truly become one of the strongest warriors. Looks like Ernest lost that little bet. This year, the friendly meeting to exchange experiences was the most vibrant. Not only all the city's residents found out about this, but also those who lived far beyond its borders. One of those guys was Rudolph. He was eager to meet the winner and measure his strength against him. I have an idea. You can go straight to where such competitions are taking place. Now their path lies straight to the fortress. Finally, among the losers, there was at least one real warrior. But right now, Eugene had no time for that. Before he could recover from the battle, he found himself in a strange place in the game. He seemed to have entered his own memories. He remembers how he suffered in captivity, how many evil hands reached for his throat. Now they all seem to come alive in his memory, and were planning to attack again. If he has to cut off each of their heads, he will do it. Now he has regained his former strength, which means they have no chance. In a second, he delivers several devastating blows with his sword. Perhaps this will make those who planned such a thing change their minds. Wait a minute, what is this guy doing here? Had he also become part of his nightmarish memories? No one could compare to Ronald, because he once made his life hell. He bullied the one-armed boy like a true psychopath. At least in my memories, I want to respond to this bastard in the same way. By the way, this was just the opportunity. There is no need to hesitate if Eugene is confident in his abilities. Suddenly he realizes that his mana is gradually starting to change. If he had had that power back then, Eugene's fate would have been different. Is one hit enough to win? Wait a minute, who is this? Salvador entered his memories, even though he was the only one who cared about him. When he was in captivity, only this guy wanted to help him get out. Perhaps help will be needed now. The image of a great demon, the culprit of all his misfortunes, appears next to him. It is difficult to say whether this appearance was an illusion or the demon was real. It is impossible to die in your own memories, which means there is no need to be afraid. El Salvador orders the immediate return of those who are now in mortal danger. He must go beyond his consciousness and realize the true cause of his suffering. It takes courage to admit the truth. From now on, everything depends only on him, but Salvador always believed in him. After this, he suddenly turns in the other direction, attacking the great demon head-on. At this moment, Eugene suddenly jumps up on his bed and tries to understand what he saw. It seems he took a little nap and had another nightmare. Give up your thoughts and find out the truth? What does all this mean? Suddenly, he heard Bernard's voice greeting all the 9th-rank cadets. He was here already. It came as a surprise to everyone else, too. Bernard doesn't usually come to places like this, but this time he won't be there for long. Now it's clear why Emma is so worried around him. But Bernard came only to thank the guy. As a reward for victory, he is ready to give the cadet whatever he wants. Eugene immediately says that he needs a teacher who will teach him the best fencing technique. He knows that the Council of Elders won't like this. It's obvious, but recently he was able to defeat their main favorite. If they are against his choice of mentor, he will protest to them himself right at the meeting. Brave guy. In that case, he needs to follow Bernard, because there is already a suitable candidate. He was much closer than Eugene could have imagined. And here he is, by the way. They hadn't seen each other for a long time since their last training session, and it was good to see each other again. Ernest was a little surprised at how his behavior had changed. When they saw each other for the last time, he was still afraid of many things. However, after defeating Ethan, he became much bolder. Clara says that he will be trained by an 8-star warrior with incredible abilities. In fact, he was the former head of the White Sword Corps and had vast combat experience. And now he will pass on all his skills to his student. But the main thing is that right now, Eugene finds out his real name. It all fits together. In his past life, he really was Salvador, who saved him from captivity. Everything is returning to its place. Just then, Ethan returned to have a quick talk with his mother. She was a little unhappy with his recent defeat. It's a shame, a real shame. And yet he is her son, isn't he? Defeats can also be useful if he learns not to repeat mistakes. Golden words, very wise. Oh damn! She had already told him about the connection with the dark entity. There is no need to lose your temper when talking to your mother, even if it means pacifying the demon within you. If this is true, why is this still going on? Now Ernest will treat him as his student. To tell the truth, Eugene has a lot to learn from him too. Still, Bernard insists that training should begin as soon as possible. But Bernard himself could use a visit from someone. These four have gone too far in their intentions. Richard was ready to crush into dust anyone who stood in his way. And among his relatives there was one psychopath who was ready to support him in everything. What they feared so much has happened. The boy managed to win the competition against the hope of the leading family. I feel very ashamed for Ethan. However, they should have thought about this in advance. Yet, it was the elders' plan to put him in competition. These bastards think they can blame Richard for everything and wash their hands of it. He suggests developing countermeasures first, and then making accusations. Only this should have been talked about a little earlier. Their main allies are killed, and only Douglas miraculously survives. Vanessa was merciless to those who turned the ruling family against her son. If he doesn't want to lie down next to them, he'll have to answer a couple of questions. Douglas claims he was merely a simple executor. Nonsense. People like him usually start quarrels between families. She hates political intrigue, and lies more than anything else in the world. Such things are not suitable for a warrior. However, without the help of this guy, she cannot go against the elder. Now he is obliged to remain silent until she gives the signal to act. If everything is clear, Douglas can get out of here. A minute later, he was already free. This big guy was only a little away from death, but now there is a chance to correct your mistakes. Luckily, Richard immediately contacted the crystal. Douglas accuses him of still not blocking the second and third gates. It seems like this idiot needs to have everything explained to him using his fingers. Could he have expected Eugene to surpass himself during the competition? But if this continues, they will not be able to escape responsibility for what they have done. They have already fallen out of favor with Bernard, and there is no turning back. This means that Douglas is in cahoots with them, and it is beneficial for him to continue what he has started. Meanwhile, Eugene is in his room, woke up, and he did it just in time. Another second, and the tip of that guy's blade would have pierced his head. We must manage to grab the blade before it's too late. It's a pity. It was a great pillow. It turned out that this was how the new teacher tested the student. Ernest explains that Eugene must be prepared for anything. Besides, his main training starts right now. If he can handle these training sessions, Ernest will let him out of here. Until then, we'll have to work hard. But there was no such agreement. Should he warn him about this? The magic pendant was a valuable relic for any fighter. It will self-destruct at the touch of another. But the destruction of Ernest's pendant will disrupt the sword transfer ceremony. In other words, the task has become even more difficult. To become true warriors and learn the truth, many things need to change, and we need to start by destroying the damn pendant. In fact, everything was the other way around. To help Eugene come to his senses faster, Ernest hit him with a magical wave. It seems that Eugene still doesn't understand who he's dealing with. Of course, he was his teacher, but that didn't mean Ernest would be soft. And can a creature with such a dark essence be lenient towards someone? Even if it concerns his own student. This is what the intelligent giant that Eugene may soon have looks like. I wonder if he was really that smart. The main thing is that it was fucking gigantic. And also incredibly strong. The second blow of the intelligent giant proved this perfectly. Eugene failed to repel this attack again. He was thrown so far that he would not have survived another blow. Damn intelligent giant. Maybe that's enough training for today? Oh no, his training was just beginning. He will have to show everything he has learned up to this day. Meanwhile, some people also had to work hard. True, Vincent had no other chores besides washing. Everyone else was pretty bored too. Perhaps a visit from a gentleman might cheer them up. Richard was already there, although there was not a shadow of a smile on his face. This old man didn't come here for childish fun. He hoped that there would be no one in the boy's room who would interfere with his plans. In this he was right. Almost a week had passed since the start of training, and this opened up some opportunities for Richard. Thanks to her pet, Sophia was able to figure out his plans earlier. This little disembodied pet was very useful to her. With his help, the girl was the first to know all the news. It was clear that she was worried about her master, but the pet reported that everything was fine. But was he able to get out of that space? She didn't want him to get hurt, just like Eugene himself. True, to do this you will have to repel several powerful attacks. Ernest got really carried away and didn't feel sorry for his protege at all. Looking at him, Eugene realized that the guy was too strong. Each of his new attacks could have been fatal if this hadn't been a training fight. But even so, the guy had a hard time. Over time, he learned the basics that would help him in the future. No opponent has ever had such strong magic. Even with the help of accelerated microcurrent, it was not possible to break through the energy dome. You can't penetrate it with anything. The range is too big. Instead, he only raised dust and never achieved his goal. In terms of power, it was even weaker than his yellow lightning. It seems that it is not enough to admire the strength of your opponent, you need to master the same strength yourself. Otherwise, you will only have to defend yourself, not attack. By the way, here is the pendant. If you grab onto this pendant, everything will go faster. Didn't catch it, but the pendant was so close. It's a shame because it almost worked. He knew it would happen. Now Eugene is unlikely to get up, which means it's time to stop training. Ernest understands that Eugene is still too weak for such attacks. Maybe some water? The red-haired guy didn't look like much of a threat, but looks can be deceiving. It's hard to lose after so many victories. The intelligent giant was his main secret that brought him victory. Henry says it would be nice to have a giant like that. What if everything around is just an illusion? What if the bottle doesn't actually exist, and everything he sees is just a form of pure energy? This insight came to him only today, but it changes everything. And everyone who was there noticed it. Eugene always thought that energy should be controlled and released by oneself, like poured water. But there was no need for that. It needs to flow through the body and the sword on its own, and then release it outside, allowing it to act on its own. Smart guy. The training is not over yet, but it is clear that it will change. Eugene's enlightenment does not cancel the main condition of the test, and he had no intention of canceling anything, so the fight should continue. In that case, you need to test it in practice. He spoke well at first, but it's time to move from words to action. Ernest didn't take into account that Eugene had already joined them a long time ago. If his words did not convince him, what would he say to this? Never in his life had he managed to cast such a powerful magic shot. Even Ernest had never seen anything like it. Where is he? He realizes that his new student is using techniques that are only available to experienced warriors. Now he has to find out something else. Not so fast. He really understood a lot, but he will be able to apply this knowledge in practice only with time. Understanding the technique is only half the success. The rest is achieved through training. Carefully. That's what I'm talking about. Eugene has not yet been able to receive spiritual support, but his rival had long had an intelligent giant that gave him energy. And if you can't see it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Since childhood, something has been seriously preventing Eugene from revealing his talent. It is very important for a warrior to let go of doubts and childhood fears. Only then will he be able to reach the limit of his power. While the smart guy was giving out free advice, Eugene noticed something. It's better to take this for yourself, because the pendant only gets in Ernest's way in battle. By the way, what will happen if you break this damn pendant into small pieces? Everything worked out and the results will soon be noticeable. The pendant is destroyed, which means part of Ernest's power is shattered into pieces. I should apologize for the small scratch. That's just how it happened. Well, not a bad lunge for a first real workout. Eugene has passed the test and is worthy of mastering the magic of the sword. He warns that next time it will be much more painful. That same evening, many already knew about what happened at training. Just now, his maid had an important message. In Sophia's hands was an order for a new mission, which needed to be delivered personally to Eugene. It is surprising that such an order was intended for a cadet of the 9th rank. Usually only 7th rank cadets can handle such tasks. The main thing is that the person who ordered this mission seemed completely unfamiliar to them. But does it really matter when he has the opportunity? Still, he should have thought a little. He soon discusses this mission with Norman and Ernest, hoping to get their advice. If he were to undertake such a task, he would do it alone. Of course, it is very dangerous, but the mission may turn out to be a simple test from the Elder. In other words, he is testing Eugene's strength. Well, there may be some truth to this, and Norman allows him to take this step. To be honest, it was only his war, and the victory would be overcoming his own fear. Words worthy of a winner. In the process, he will inevitably be drawn into a struggle for power and will have to act alone. And yet he will prove that Bernard was right to trust him. It seems that this young man has already decided everything. In this case, Norman supports him in everything and hopes for a quick meeting. Eugene hopes so too. But Helga hopes that she won't be given another job. Unfortunately, Norman was already there and all hopes were dashed. It's a lovely day, isn't it? Norman was in no mood to waste time on empty talk. It would be better to talk about the task from Richard himself. This old man would never have given Eugene a task out of good intentions. It is better to immediately contact the director of the fortress via the communication crystal. Right now, a man was breaking through the fortress gates. He just kept saying that he needed to see Eugene and nothing more. The guards tried to block the gates to prevent him from entering the territory. Even his assistant advises to simply submit an official application for a visit. But why waste time when you have a weapon in your hands? Instead of an official application, it is much easier to kill them all. Then you won't have to waste time on all sorts of nonsense. That's right, these two idiots didn't hear right. He never liked the stupid fuss with documents. Rudolph was one step away from delivering his first fatal blow. At that moment, he realized that there was another excellent fighter nearby. True, it was already too late to realize this. Who could deal with him so quickly from a distance? Helga was very skilled with a whip, and there were no problems with the boy. Oliver is still trying to protect his young master. You shouldn't do this. In a little while, the young master will have no one to help him for the rest of his life. Oops. The balance of power has changed, and these two better calm down. Helga wants to know how they managed to get to the fortress. Rudolph had better answer her question before she gets completely angry. Wonderful woman. At the same time, the cart almost reached the entrance to the city. At first glance, this task was no different from other missions. There were still the same green goblins that just needed to be killed. Actually, that's all. Oh yeah, these goblins lived in groups and were very weak alone. But there was a goblin who for some reason always walked alone. He was either too strong or was driven out by his group. Yes, that's all now. Simple task, kill a lone goblin. If his guess is correct, it is worth hurrying. He quickly climbs onto the roof of the carriage, hoping that the driver will not notice him ahead of time. And now you can discover yourself. He would like to get off here if this nice man doesn't mind. Although, if he objects, we'll have to persuade him. He is a little surprised, and it is understandable. He only realized this too late. Eugene pushes off so hard to jump that the cart starts to rock. For Eugene, it doesn't matter anymore because he has chosen the jumping point. A few seconds later, he was there. It is much more convenient to start a mission on solid ground. He hopes to find the goblin and complete the task before Eugene meets Richard. The special feature of the lightning giant's support was the truth. Only the truth within him allowed him to merge with this energy. It instantly activates a deafening thunder, spreading it everywhere. Blue lightning is weak, but can cover an entire area. Lightning actually covers the entire area around Eugene, and he can now see moving objects. There was one such object somewhere nearby. Perhaps this is the very same lonely goblin. The green big guy doesn't yet know who he's going to meet today. In fact, he didn't expect guests and didn't like company. That's why he was a lonely goblin, but today his plans would change. He immediately noticed that this monster was too huge for its kind. In addition, the strange marks on the monster's body could have been magical. You can't judge his strength just because he's a goblin. Perhaps he was slightly mistaken. Did the monster attack first? If so, it's time to put aside unnecessary thoughts and take up defensive positions. True, this may not help against such powerful shots. His opponent had mastered various techniques and also handled a sword. Eugene realizes that his opponent is not a green giant at all. Instead of a goblin, he sees Rudolph in front of him, who was able to track him down. Today was a special day. It's just on such a day that you can fight, especially since no one will interfere in the forest. It was strange that Rudolph had a 9th rank cadet badge hanging on his chest. But now it's better to think about something else. Eugene realized that their conversations had disturbed someone. The green giant did not like it when chatter disturbed the silence of the forest. Eugene managed to dodge his first attack, flying into the air. You could say he was born for the second time today. Everyone be on guard. A reckless attack on a mutant could cost you your life. Alternatively, the goblin may be a simple chimera fueled by a dark aura. His target was anyone he could see. Eugene realized that he had changed his target. It was in vain that this 9th rank cadet decided to go into the forest. He takes on too much. You just have to grip the spear more tightly, and hit him once so that he doesn't rise again. It was a great fight. Too bad it was so short. And it's a pity that these two didn't see how this fine fellow operates. At their first meeting, Helga was able to tie him up with her whip. But then she had the advantage. And yet it is worth talking about the main thing. Norman believed that she had deliberately sent Rudolph after Eugene. To be honest, it was a great move, as such a talented fighter will come in handy. She had no doubt that he would like this idea, but something made her think. Then she suddenly asked if she had even one day left from her recent vacation. Strange question. Did she also want to have fun in the forest with the goblins? In fact, there was only one goblin, and he was already taken by another person. Rudolph also loved such entertainment and wielded his spear with all his might. Despite its size, the monster moved perfectly from side to side. Maybe he wants to continue? Well, in that case, there will always be someone who will support this idea. It's hard to say whether he liked Rudolph's latest strike. These childish games finally bored the giant, and he decided to use his main trump card. However, the opponent also had something at his disposal. Thanks to his speed, Rudolph managed to dodge. Besides, now two people were fighting against the monster at once. Eugene didn't expect such support. Moreover, at first they didn't get along well. He was probably on par with this guy in terms of strength. In that case, we can consider that everything is decided with the goblin. The all-penetrating spear will come in handy for just such a case. And there is no need to shout like that. He attacked with his spear with such force, as if the green giant had somehow interfered with him. They met for the first time, but it felt like they had been enemies for a long time. Incredibly, he managed to slay the monster. True, the happiness was short-lived. This is called regeneration. Yes, he possessed this rare ability, and after a few seconds his hand appeared again, as if nothing had happened. Now it was his turn. The worst part is that the other half of the goblin turned into a demon. This is something new. Eugene understands that he cannot be defeated alone, but no one said that Rudolph was fighting alone. And at that very moment, the goblin's entire body is entangled in invisible threads. These energy threads could belong to only one. At that moment, he hears the familiar voice of the butler. It turned out that Oliver had been keeping an eye on the young gentleman for a long time. Yes, he arrived just in time. However, the monster was not finished yet. The energy threads could not hold back such a monster for long. To survive, they had to come up with something else. Having taken on a demonic form, the monster gained magic. Now he could attack from afar. To be honest, he was just planning on spending a quiet day in the beautiful forest. And now he'll have to kill the 3 bastards who got in his way. It is clear that someone else was controlling it all this time. And this someone could monitor everything that was happening there. Damn, Roderick, this is his doing. At this moment, the monster suddenly disappears. His mana was fading away, as if he had decided to run away from them. And this was all due to Rudolph, and Oliver had absolutely nothing to do with it. How nice it is to hear such words addressed to you. Actually, I find it hard to believe. Of course, he was a descendant of great warriors, the best on the continent. But looking at him, it was difficult to see in him an example to follow, especially when he smiled. But seriously, it's strange to see him in the vicinity of the fortress. Henry decides it would be better to stick close to him. The elder's only son was someone that other families would not dare touch. An alliance with him will be a good protection for Eugene. Well, it looks like Henry might have something other than nonsense to say. And indeed, there was sense in his assistant's words. This strange goblin was too dangerous. It was not worth taking on this task alone if it was not so important. Or was there something Oliver didn't realize? Actually, something really did happen. But now they are together, and that's great news. Since there are no enemies left, we can fight each other. This guy thinks about nothing but fights. Ethan thought pretty much the same until he ran into Eugene. These two had something in common, and the same end awaited them. The daredevil doesn't realize it yet. That's probably why he acts so boldly with Eugene. In fact, he simply wants to surpass him and acknowledges his strength. This is where we should have started the conversation. In this case, it is worth giving him the opportunity to test his strength. Incredibly, he agreed. The main task now is to catch the goblin, and then they can fight. But can't we have a short duel at least once? He would be happy if Eugene gave him such an opportunity. It's worth repeating for those who have poor hearing. First, he needs to catch the goblin, and then he is ready to have a duel. This young man was quite persistent, unlike Rudolph. His character was not at all childish, unlike some. Eugene hopes he won't have to repeat it a 3rd time. Rudolph also hopes that he will keep his promise. There won't be any problems with this. You can trust me. Believe, hope, and wait for miracles. On this occasion, they go to a cozy place. It looks like they're getting into some trouble right now. Eugene believes that the chimera was created by someone and the goblin was an illusion. Oliver thinks so too, but it remains to be seen. At that moment, quiet footsteps are heard near them. However, the dark aura that spread everywhere was noticeable from afar. Eugene instantly jumps up from his seat, prepared for the worst. There was nothing to confuse the dark magic that came from somewhere in the darkness. The stranger in the cloak must be the one sent by the goblin's creator. This man acted as if he was under hypnosis, and blocking his way, he asked for a little time. It is clear that this request took him by surprise. It was actually a strange reaction. Moreover, the stranger tried to get away from there. But don't be so hasty at the very beginning of a pleasant conversation. It would be better to stay here until everything becomes clear. Now this bastard has to explain why the hell he's after him. The closer Eugene got, the stronger the dark magic felt. Yes, this bastard was saturated from head to toe with an unknown aura. At some point, his physical body can't handle that amount of magic. Eugene suddenly felt like a monster was bursting out of him. Perhaps he is now facing another test. He asks everyone to move away from there and not put themselves in danger. Since when does he fight monsters alone? It was only his war, because the stranger was sent for his soul. If something happens to him, he is ready to accept the fight. The main thing is that he stays alive after this. Carefully. Oh shit, did he get torn apart? Oliver already regretted that he had not been there a little earlier. This young man risked his life by taking the full brunt of the blow. He barely survived the monstrous explosion. Fortunately, there were no customers of this establishment nearby. It's time to act. Energy threads could quickly immobilize an opponent. First of all, Oliver creates an energy barrier, protecting the young master, in case a monster bursts out of the flames. But right now it's worth thinking about how to help that guy. Indeed, Eugene's life is in danger. A second later, another terrible explosion thundered in the establishment. It is clear that this explosion was set up by someone. All that remains is to find out the name of the dark magician. Eugene still did not move a step from this place. If the stranger had survived, he would have learned something useful. However, the guy noticed it. They realized that his body was completely weak. A moment later, he collapsed to the floor. Someone's cunning plan worked. Oliver guessed who the customer was. But now the main thing is to help this brave young man. Here you could find a free room and come to your senses. It was a shame that the opponent was fighting so meanly. But there was also good news. Henry explained that the boy was still alive. This means that we will soon be able to find out everything. If a doctor is needed, Rudolph will quickly call him. Eugene thinks that meditation will help him recover his strength faster. He asks Oliver to provide security for a while. Does he really trust them enough to entrust his safety to them? Of course, they will pay well for this. This is where we should have started. While Eugene meditated in the cocoon, Oliver kept a close watch on him outside. He'll have to stay there for a while. Still, it's amazing that he survived the explosion. It seems he managed to cut through the explosion itself with his magic sword. It would be great if Oliver learned this. Even Oliver wasn't sure such a technique would work. Moreover, the explosion was caused by that same stranger. The man was already dead, but his body was almost not burned. However, they then noticed that the body was turning into a dark aura, and then it completely evaporated. Now everything is clear. Eugene's magic should be much stronger than the aura of an ordinary cadet, which means there is one more reason to fight him. First, he needs to recover. He had just finished meditating. Rudolph's look spoke for itself. He still wanted to fight him, but the main thing now was something completely different. That man's mana was concentrated in his heart, but he didn't look like a real warrior. However, Rudolph is not at all like him either. Seriously, can Elder Richard's actions be considered a mere coincidence? Was there anyone else here? Oh yeah, he himself asked Oliver for protection. With such skills, he himself could have done just fine. The main thing is that Eugene did nothing, although he knew about the explosion. He explained this by the fact that there were many civilians nearby. If he had moved away, innocent people would have died from the explosion. So he did his duty, risking his life. Rudolph would certainly never do something like that. And even his butler understands this perfectly well. It's a pity that he serves Rudolph and not Eugene. However, this can be corrected in the future. It seems that this man is asking to work for him. But now the main part of his order needs to be fulfilled. Oliver wishes him luck, hoping to catch the goblin. And then, when you meet Richard in person, you can wipe his nose with this piece of paper. Meanwhile, the goblin was walking through the forest, but he hardly enjoyed such an evening walk. But his owner was quite satisfied with everything. It's nice when things go well and everything you planned comes true. However, things were going well not only for him. Rudolph was also cheerful the whole way, which cannot be said about Eugene. At this age, you could become more serious. But the guy was always bored talking about anything serious. His butler's main task was to ensure Rudolph's safety. After the explosion, he thought about something. He can't wait to see how Eugene's righteous sword can help him. He promises that he will not touch a single hair of the goblin. It was nice to hear that, but Rudolph won't be as polite to this green bastard. By the way, he just had a question. He still doesn't understand where they are going. Eugene explains that they will soon find themselves in the place where they met the mutant. He lived not far from here. If only he could get his hands on it right now. In any case, we can try to track him down. Hey, what is he looking for in the bushes? Goblin droppings. They'll be a great clue to help them out. It sounds unusual, but he had already practiced this tracking technique in his past life. It gave brilliant results then, so it's worth repeating the success. It's a pity there is no cleaner way. There was something else weird, but it could have worked too. Step by step, Eugene tracks down a trail that could lead to his goal. Such huge traces of dirty paws cannot belong to another forest animal. Surprisingly, they managed to search without any attributes. Unless, of course, goblin excrement is considered such an attribute. Something else soon comes to light. This search comes too easily to them, and something is wrong here. The tracks are laid out so neatly, as if someone did it on purpose. Usually it is difficult to find the monster's trace, but this time it catches your eye. His guesses came true much sooner than he expected. Anyone in Eugene's place would have died in the explosion. However, the magical barrier worked and both remained safe. The magic mine was lying right in the reed field, which meant that someone was waiting for them nearby. You just have to look closely and spot the surveillance. By the way, this place is strange for a reed field. Releasing a huge stream of energy forward, he instantly cuts a straight path to the very edge. At the very end, Eugene notices the pursuer. A little more and the barrier would have ceased to function. However, on the other side of the barrier, Roderick feeds it with his mana. It's a shame that so much pure energy was wasted. But he still manages to burn the field to the ground, noticing a red seal in front of him. There was clearly someone here, and here he is, a pleasant meeting. This trickster created an illusory trap, and most likely, Richard ordered him to do so. Nothing personal, just work. He needs to find out what happens to those who do this kind of thing. It turns out that the duel was inevitable, and Roderick was preparing for it. Even the two opponents didn't frighten the madman at the other end of the field. In that case, perhaps the huge sword scares him a little. Rudolph's spear was also tightly clenched in his fist. It soon became clear why Roderick acted so confidently with them. The lousy goblin was once again ready to crush everything that fell into his clutches. This time he had no other target except these two. On the other hand, this bastard will cover him with magical attacks. The plan was great. All that was left was to start the fun. If they had known in advance how this walk would end, they would have stayed in the forest. If they had the necessary information, they could have prepared. Unfortunately, Roderick's projectile hits the target right on target. Of course, it was most convenient to attack the enemy from above. This psychopath won't stop until he kills every single one of them. Let him remember this moment. When the time comes to ask for forgiveness, Eugene will remind him of this smile. If, of course, he even lives to see that time. Energy threads had already managed to entangle his body from all sides. After this battle, my face will have to be stitched up again. Yes, it will take a lot of thread to sew the torn pieces of meat back together. This is the best thing Rudolph has seen in his entire life. It's nice to receive compliments from the gentleman. In fact, he did a great job and kept his promise. He tried. However, there was one problem that they did not initially take into account. If this goblin was an illusion, then Roderick could have used a double as well. And indeed, a second later, the restless Roderick appeared in that place again. He probably didn't like the trick, but he was still alive. The time for jokes was over, and now he wanted to answer them with the same trick. Oliver was first on his list of people he would wipe out. Perhaps Rudolph's wish will come true, and he will be able to see this miracle again. If, of course, Oliver can use energy threads as effectively. This time, Roderick decides to change the original plan a little. At the end of the duel, he will take their corpses and make a more perfect chimera out of them. Hope dies last. If he's planning something similar, it's worth dealing with him right after this monster. Eugene is the first to take action, delivering a devastating blow with his sword. The monster has indeed become much stronger than it was at the very beginning. His master is still feeding him, somewhere in ambush. He even managed to land one good blow, taking the initiative into his own paws. However, Norman still continues to fight and does not intend to become part of the Chimera. Roderick believes that his specialization is not suitable for head-on collisions, but in his hands there is something suitable. He enjoys attacking from a distance much more than close combat. There's something in common between Norman's threads and this guy's chains. Just like the butler, Roderick can control them from a distance, but instead, the monster does all the work. Sometimes this method works better. Now let's test this in action. A second later, an explosion goes off and blinds everyone. Everyone manages to run to a safe distance. It seems that Rudolph was right, and the scales of the dragon ancestor reliably protect the monster. Has anyone really never heard of such scales? There is an extinct subspecies that looks like a human. Its scales are almost impermeable to mana, like those of real dragons. Now it's clear what covers one of his giant paws. And in this form, he is ready to endure all the humiliation? Or he will remember that he was once a king here. The bastard acted as if the monster was a worthless bug, although the big guy was bigger and stronger than him. He better remember this right now. Then it will be much easier for the rest. Something has changed. The monster doesn't move, but he's clearly up to something. We need to help the monster remember who he was before he was tamed, and so they immediately disappear from the field. Roderick must have missed those energy threads. If so, Norman is willing to share them with anyone. He was right when he felt the first changes a minute ago. But you can't think for long when you are surrounded by enemies. He immediately creates a magical field around himself in the hope of surviving. But now this trick won't work. It became clear that it would not be possible to repel this attack. Then we'll have to send that brainless cretin into attack again. The monster still obeys him and catches the spear in the air. Rudolph loses his balance from such an unexpected reaction. We should have waited for the others instead of rushing into the attack. It turns out that everything returned to its place. Or maybe he's wrong. He played dirty against them from the very beginning. One blow from Eugene caused him serious damage. A good attack, but the psychopath Roderick still stood firm. Destroy them. Is he deaf? Actually, after everything that happened, his target was Roderick. And indeed, the goal was much closer. All he had to do was stretch out his paw. It was no accident that Eugene aimed at his magical leash in his first attack. Now nothing stopped the goblin from releasing his rage. Now he will have to turn his seal against his former ally. But can it be called an alliance if he simply used it? It's time to return the favor. This trick from the monster Rudolph definitely pleased him. He loved this kind of thing and wanted to enjoy the spectacle. The main thing in such spectacles is not to lose your head and stay in one piece. True, Roderick failed to cope with either one. The giant squeezed everything that was left of him in his huge paw. He didn't know that by destroying the creator, he would also destroy the monster itself. The tragic ending was known from the very beginning. The monster seemed to be melting before our eyes and was counting the last seconds. Now Eugene had to do what he came into this forest for. And now it will be much easier. Otherwise, everything was just fine. It's a pity this monster won't be able to enjoy the good weather anymore. But Rudolph seemed to remember his distant childhood again. This mission was entrusted personally by the Elder, not yet knowing that Eugene would not be alone. They didn't want him back, but he had to upset them a little. Now he has reliable witnesses to confirm what happened. The main such witness was Norman. He doesn't mind speaking in court, does he? Well, he will speak if asked to do so. At this moment, the heroes truly deserved applause. They behaved with dignity, destroying two of their strongest opponents. How did Helga end up here? It seems as if she had been watching them all this time, and soon she will have to explain it. She promises to help him complete the mission if he shows the contents of the bag. There were 2 severed heads in the bag, nothing special. Oh yeah, she knows whose heads these are. This was the main evidence, which means there is a smell of victory here. Rather, it stinks of victory, to put it bluntly. Seriously, she learned a lot from Douglas, who was caught red-handed. It turned out that he was sent by Richard, who was clearly not in the mood for an alliance. Maybe we should turn this to our advantage. Norman was on duty right now and could help a little. Indeed, he was angry that Helga had been able to take another vacation. How many vacations can this girl take, and when will she start working? He hated working overtime, especially for others. Is this fair? Actually, the subordinate came with news that should make him happy. It's unlikely that anything will make him happy now. Or maybe yes? The report made it clear that it was time to finish the paperwork, since Eugene had completed the mission. The monster was destroyed, and the heads of the 2 were securely packed in a bag. The same report was lying on the table in Bernard's office. The girl sent information to everyone who was interested in the success of the case. Besides, the main character was already here. Eugene had 2 ideas about who might have been the customer. First, this mission could have been a deliberate trap. Bernard was slightly disappointed that a mission of this level had become a problem for him. Actually, it wasn't a problem. What does it mean? This means that he knows how to quickly solve all problems. He came to Bernard to tell him about it personally. What then was his second guess? He believes that no one except Richard knew about the incident with the monster. If this is true, Richard was leading not only his competitors by the nose, but also his closest allies. It was the best news he could bring. By the way, he was ready to dump 2 more pieces of evidence out of the bag onto the table. It's a good thing he didn't do it, because footsteps were heard outside the door. Teresa runs into the office as if there was a fire behind her. But at that moment, no one understood why there was such a rush. It turned out that the main suspect in this case had met with some misfortune. This man was playing dangerous games, but it was time to stop. That's right, Richard's game ended with his quick death. However, Teresa considers it suicide. The old man pierced his heart with a sword. A suicide note was found next to him, which laid out everything in detail. Eugene believes that the suicide was staged by those they were almost on the trail of. But where does such confidence come from? And who could have been involved in this dirty business? It's hard to say, but this would not have happened if the old man had understood the full responsibility. Behind the scenes, forces could have dealt with him and disguised it as suicide. It had to be someone strong and confident, who had the best mercenaries under his control. If this is so, then this whole thing was just a show with a suicidal ending. He is very funny. It is unlikely that he saw anything that the experienced Teresa did not notice. She hopes Bernard doesn't believe all this nonsense, and yet there was some truth in the young man's words. In that case, she asks him to go with her. She'll need to borrow a couple of his abilities to look at what happened with them. The door to Richard's office was still unlocked. This further confirmed Eugene's hunch that this was a classic murder. It is unlikely that the old man would have been able to plunge such a huge sword into his own heart. However, this was only a guess, which Teresa could now confirm. I'd like to take a closer look. However, what is there to look at other than the old man's corpse? But maybe Teresa still doesn't understand something? This sword was too clean, as if it had been stabbed the first time. In other words, before his death, the old man could not resist the mercenaries. No matter how strong he was in life, there will always be those who are stronger. However, in Richard's death, there is no trace of hesitation, no trace of pause. It turns out that this corpse was a fake, and the old man is still alive. If Eugene's guess is correct, they should find the real Richard. One little god can help with this. Isn't that true? It would have been worthwhile to consult with him first before making such bold assumptions. It's strange, he usually answers any question right away. Actually, everything that was said was true, and there really was a fake corpse in that room. You should have said so right away. It's reminiscent of dark magic used to copy corpses. Teresa had never heard of such magic, but Eugene had no reason to lie to her. With her all-seeing gaze, she could confirm his guess. And the woman admits that her eye distinguishes truth and lies only through people, but cannot see the essence of what happened. To do this, she only needs to touch a person. And now she wants to know how he knows that Richard was plotting against him? She shouldn't have looked at this corpse, because the woman was clearly not ready for this. Or she just doesn't care about the old man and the murder. She just wants to know where Eugene got his intelligence and knowledge of magic from. Meanwhile, the long-awaited meeting took place. Bernard personally came to the enemy's house and brightened up their boring evening. Does anyone want some tea? Jasmine. Delicious. That's for sure. I wonder if they will continue to discuss the taste of tea. Feuding families probably have other things to talk about. For example, you can talk about the corpse of an old man. Josephine knew that Richard had already been excluded from the Council of Elders. It seemed they had already covered all traces and were waiting for his visit. Then it was worth stocking up on tea, otherwise there wouldn't be enough for the evening. If she's right, Bernard just came to air his grievances to everyone else. She was a very clever woman, and there is nothing more to add. The head came personally to express his dissatisfaction to the other members of the Supreme Council, and there was a reason for that. And some people already guess who this boy really is to Bernard. It turns out they guessed right. It is no coincidence that Eugene's name was engraved on the plaque. Eugene was his son, wasn't he? And they know the name of this young man's biological mother. With such words, she could anger Bernard, who was already barely holding back. Although there is no point in arguing with this, he often recalls the last moments of this young woman's life. Fate is unfair. The choice was made for them, but he must take care of their common child. And if he has to, he will destroy every bastard in this world who raised a hand against the living thing that remained after her death.